Naruto, in the name of time, I will shake the ninja world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, People from the Future Come to the Past. It's graduation season again, and Feng is standing on the platform to give a speech as usual. After a passionate and high-spirited speech, the students began to be divided into classes. Minato sat in the classroom with a warm smile on his face all the time, quietly waiting for the head teacher to assign classes, but his eyes kept looking towards one position, that was Kushina's seat. According to the homeroom teacher, Kushina was unwell and had gone home on leave from school, but a clever Minato did not believe it. He knew from books that the Uzumaki clan would not easily get sick, but that's all. I don't know the rest. Hey, Kushina, where are you? Minato sighed to himself, but soon perked up and listened carefully to every word of the teacher. Soon, one teacher after another came to pick up their students from outside the door, and the number of students in the class became smaller and smaller until he was the only one left. Minato looked around and couldn't help but frown. I'm the only one left. Does the school have other arrangements? After thinking about it, he couldn't help but ask, Teacher, don't I have teammates? Minato, of course not, the homeroom teacher said with a smile. This student was the most talented he had ever seen. Minato wondered, then why am I the only one left? The class owner pointed out something. That means you are likely to be noticed by some big shot. Minato was stunned when he heard that. Being noticed by a big shot. Seeing Minato in a daze, the homeroom teacher smiled slightly and did not elaborate helplessly. Minato had to suppress his inner impatience for the time being and continue waiting. After a moment, the teacher suddenly looked solemn, bowed respectfully toward the door and said, Greetings, Master Mito. Minato looked over at the sound, but his eyes fell on the big shot, and he said in surprise, Kushina. Kushina waved excitedly at Minato and said, Minato, did you miss me? Mito smiled and shook his head, then looked at Minato. Little guy, I told the Hokage-sama that you will be a team with Kushina from now on. Although Minato didn't know Mito, since he could speak in front of the Hokage. He must be the big shot that the teacher mentioned. He took a deep breath, tried his best to suppress the joy in his heart, and greeted respectfully. Hello, Kushina said dissatisfiedly. Minato, you have met my grandmother. There is no need to be so respectful. Have you seen it before? Minato looked at Miro in confusion, and searched his mind carefully, but still came up blank. Mito laughed dumbly. We met once when you entered school. After this hint, Minato suddenly understood, but he was still a little confused. After all, there was a big difference in appearance. Miro had seen countless people, so he naturally knew the doubts in his heart, but he didn't intend to elaborate. After all, death is always a bit heavy for children. Well, you'll know later. You haven't seen each other for a while, so I won't bother you anymore. Mito rubbed Kushina's head, smiled and left. After leaving the school, the idle Hoshino Kaede stood at the door early, looking at Mito, whose face was getting older and older. In silence, Miro smiled with relief. My boy, birth, aging, sickness and death are something that everyone will experience. There is nothing to be sad about. I am lucky enough to be alive today and see Konoha's rise, Feng said in a heavy tone. Master's wife, before he could say anything. Mito laughed and scolded. I don't miss you when you're like this. Where is your casual look? Let's go. There's no point dwelling on the past. It's better to relax and look forward. After saying that, Mito waved his hand and strolled alone on the street with a big smile on his face, as if he had no regrets anymore. Feng Hoshino stood where he was, watching the Konoha elder gradually disappear from his sight, and ripples began to rise in his heart, which had been calm for so long. A month later, a piece of news quickly spread throughout Konoha that the first Hokage's wife, Uzumaki Mito, had passed away at Mito's house. All of Konoha's higher-ranking officials gathered together, all dressed in black, bowing their heads in silence. Minato, I don't have a grandma anymore, Kushina said in a daze, big tears falling, her voice trembling. Leaning on Minato's shoulder, Minato sighed and patted her back soothingly, whispering soothing words. Hokage-sama, isn't it a little too hasty to spread the news of Mito-sama's passing like this? The head of the military intelligence department, Genichi Yamanaka, said as he stood behind Kaede. Hoshino, the death of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki was undoubtedly a heavy blow to Konoha, and it was even more important because Mito was the wife of the first Hokage. Feng glanced at him and said calmly, Konoha's strength has never been due to a certain person. Do you understand? Upon hearing this, Yamanaka Yuanai said in a deep voice, "Understood." Then, Hoshino Kaede paused and said, "How is the Sand Village?" Yamanaka Genichi immediately perked up and said, "The impact on the Sand Village has been profound. 50% of its supplies come from Konoha, water and food sources are firmly under control." Hearing this, Zingai Feng nodded, feeling relieved, and said nothing more. Just as Kaede Hoshino said, although the death of Uzumaki Mito made all major countries happy, they did not take much action ultimately. It was because they all knew that Konoha's strength had skyrocketed in recent years. Even if they make some small moves, they dare not show them in public. Moreover, the third Hokage is much more powerful than Mito. As long as he is still there, Konoha will always be strong. In a remote location in Konoha, a whirlpool suddenly appeared in an open area. Two figures, one big and one small, walked out from inside. "Wow, is this the era my father lived in?" The child looked around and said in amazement. At this time, before the big figure could say anything, the turtle in his hand began to talk to itself. "Ding ding, error. Error. Time and space are messed up. The destination is offset. Offset. Teacher Sasuke." The child was a little at a loss. Sasuke calmly put the turtle away and said expressionlessly, "Boruto, it seems we are here too early. This place should have been here even earlier, eh?" Boruto widened his eyes. Sasuke looked around. Everything here was different from the environment where he lived as a child. "Then what should we do? Dad will be in danger." Boruto became anxious and scratched his head frantically. Sasuke looked calm, held down the jumping Boruto, and spoke calmly, "Urashiki should be the same as us. Don't worry, the unstable channel will also affect him. Now the key is to figure out what year it is. As far as I know, there were 2 more Nine-Tails Jinchuriki before Naruto." Boruto doesn't know much about these past events, but that doesn't stop him from being curious. Who are the other two? The first one was Uzumaki Miro Senpai, the wife of the first Hokage. The other one is your grandmother, eh? Boruto was surprised. Chapter 177, half stupid and half clever. My grandma is a Jinchuriki. What's so surprising? Naruto was the same at the beginning. Sasuke glanced at him and Boruto immediately quieted down. His master is a ruthless man who doesn't talk much. He has suffered a lot from him. He should talk less and do more. Let's go and ask someone, Sasuke said as he started looking for his target, with Boruto following behind him. Boruto was very curious about Konoha more than half a century ago, and he looked around. Sasuke-sensei, look at the Hokage Rock. Hokage Rock is one of the symbols of Konoha, and even in Boruto's era, Hokage Rock still exists. Sasuke raised his head when he heard this. His eyes moved slightly, and he said involuntarily, I didn't expect it to be the period when that person was in power. This person will be deified in the future and will be the one who resolved the division in the ninja world. Boruto held his head in his hands, looked at the statue on the far right with some confusion and said, strange. I think I've heard of him somewhere. Didn't you attend your usual history classes? You don't even know this, Sasuke said with some disgust. Boruto smiled awkwardly, scratched his head, pointed his finger, and muttered quietly, who told the history teacher to be so boring? It's easy to fall asleep when listening to it. Sasuke paused, and said as if reminiscing, we didn't miss you before. We wanted to use every minute of the day. Boruto walked with his back to the ground and asked curiously, teacher, was Konoha very difficult in the past? No, on the contrary, it's peaceful. Then why? Boruto couldn't figure it out, but Sasuke had no intention of explaining and came to an izakaya. This is a good place, with many people and a lot of news. Sasuke seemed to explain it specifically to Boruto, and then walked in skillfully. Just as Sasuke said, there are a lot of people here, most of whom are tired after work, and chatting is a way for them to vent. Sasuke took Boruto to sit in an inconspicuous place. Can we really get any information here? Boruto expressed his doubt. Sasuke said, so, you still have a lot to learn. Ninja is not a game of playing house. Boruto didn't take it seriously. He had heard this so many times since he was a child that he had calluses all over it. Seeing him like this, Sasuke knew that preaching alone would not work, and he needed to experience it. If an elder says something to you with great sincerity, it is very likely that this is something he has personally experienced. Little guy, peace is never just words. Just as Boruto was listening to Sasuke's preaching casually, suddenly, a meaningful voice came from his ear. Sasuke's pupils shrank and he was extremely horrified. When did this person appear? With his strength, there is almost no ninja in the world who can escape his perception. Just when Sasuke's heart was in turmoil, Boruto waved his hand in a familiar manner, turned his head to the side and said, you can't trust what adults say. Just like every time my dad makes a promise he doesn't keep. The young man sitting next to Boruto paused after hearing this, then chuckled and nodded, as if in agreement. It seems that your idea is correct. Adults' promises are indeed very casual. Why make a promise if you can't do it? Boruto's eyes lit up, as if he had met a confidant, and he said excitedly, yeah, adults are so fickle, not as innocent as children. Boruto? Sasuke suddenly shouted, looking at the young man in front of him with a vigilant look. Come here, what's wrong? Although Boruto was a little naughty, he was still very obedient to the teacher except when he was being lectured. Under Sasuke's serious expression, Boruto still went over obediently. Ha, kid, has peace lasted too long? Have you lost even the most basic vigilance? Seeing Boruto walking over with a confused look on his face, the young man couldn't help but laugh heartily, but one could still see the mockery in his eyes. Boruto's face instantly turned red, and he finally realized how stupid he had been. This is obviously not the era he lives in, but he is so stupid not to be alert at all. Sasuke's face was frosty and his whole body seemed to radiate coldness, making people afraid to approach him at this moment. The people in the pub couldn't help but feel frightened. This low pressure was really unbearable, and they all fled outside. By the way, look for the sheriff's department team patrolling nearby. Seeing Sasuke, who looked like he was facing a formidable enemy, the young man clicked his tongue twice, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and looked at Boruto, who was sweating profusely. Little guy, is this your teacher? Boruto glanced at Sasuke, and seeing that he was silent, he also fell silent. Not bad, at least he's smart and knows how to curry favor with others, but cleverness is only half of it. These words sounded somewhat teasing, but Boruto seemed not to understand and looked at him with a tense face. You have a good teacher who can help you avoid many detours, the young man said approvingly. Sasuke had a cold face, and a flash of blood appeared in his eyes. 3 Mogatama slowly emerged, and then there was another change, connecting together to form a unique pattern. Who are you? His blood-red eyes stared at the person in front of him, but in his perception, the person in front of him seemed to not exist. It's like you can see it but can't touch it. It's very unreal. The young man raised the corner of his mouth and was about to answer his question, but was attracted by the movement outside the door. Sir, there are 2 strange people right here. Sasuke's eyes suddenly became sharp. They couldn't be exposed now. While he was thinking, the patrol team pushed the door open. The team leader looked around and for a moment, his eyes fixed on Sasuke and Boruto. Are you the 2 strange people? As he spoke, he looked at the 2 of them, nodding and commenting from time to time, it is indeed a bit strange. These clothes are different from the style of Konoha? Then, he paused, his expression serious. I suspect you have ill intentions, please come with us. Boruto was sweating and looked at Sasuke, wondering what they should do now. Sasuke was much calmer inside. After all, he had seen many big scenes, so this one seemed very ordinary to him. Then he wanted to use the Sharingan's illusion to change his cognition, but the next moment, his body paused and he dispelled the thought. Hokage-sama. Why are you here? The team leader exclaimed. Although these 2 people were the most suspicious, he still looked at the third person just in case. Unexpectedly, this glance made him drop his jaw in shock, and then he became excited. It is extremely difficult for someone of his status to meet the Hokage, but he didn't expect to be so lucky to meet him today. Seeing that his identity was exposed, Zengai Feng greeted helplessly. Isn't it okay to come here to hang out when you are bored? No, of course. The team leader shook his head repeatedly. Then he looked at the 2 suspicious people and asked, what about these 2? Zengai Feng smiled and said, I know him. He was too excited just now. Sorry, it's okay. In that case, I'll leave first. The misunderstanding was resolved, and the team leader saluted and left. Chapter 178. The future of Konoha is promising. The incident was settled, and Zengai Feng turned to look at the 2 people who were standing there in a daze, and couldn't help but chuckle. Why? Are you scared by my identity? That shouldn't be possible. A guest from the future shouldn't be so timid. Zengai Feng shook his head, swirled the wine glass gently, took a sip, and revealed the identities of the 2 in a relaxed tone. Then he saw the 2 people's expressions changing dramatically, especially Boruto, who couldn't hide his thoughts. His face turned pale and he said in a trembling voice, You? How did you know? Sasuke held his forehead helplessly. Having such a stupid apprentice, he suddenly felt that his future was bleak and the road ahead was cut off. You're just as reckless as Naruto, you idiot. Zengai Feng laughed heartily. Ha. Kid, should we say you are straightforward? Or stubborn? I'm inexplicably worried about the future of ninjas. Are the younger generation only capable of this kind of half-baked skills? A joke instantly made Boruto angry. and he immediately shouted, "Hey, uncle, who is a half-baked one? I'm the second in my grade and I'm recognized as the smartest one." Boruto jumped up and down to refute, trying to save his image, but he didn't notice that Sasuke next to him had a face as black as the bottom of a pot and looked extremely embarrassed. Does this idiot even know who he is talking to? He can't understand the situation at all. Sasuke felt extremely tired. Seeing Boruto talking non-stop, veins popped out on his forehead. He raised his fist as big as a sandbag, and then brought it down without hesitation. Boom, it hurts. It hurts. Sasuke-sensei, a strange swelling appeared on Boruto's head, and he was in so much pain that tears were falling. Quiet. Sasuke's tone was flat, but it revealed a chilling feeling, which made Boruto immediately cover his screaming mouth and nodded repeatedly. After watching this master-disciple drama, Zangief interrupted and said, "That kid called you Sasuke, and you just revealed your Sharingan. You are from the Uchiha clan. You seem to be quite powerful. You even have the Mangekyou, Uchiha Sasuke. Is this name based on Sarutobi Sasuke? It seems that they have high hopes for you." Although Zangief was analyzing, he was actually feeling emotional in his heart. "I thought it was the Otsutsuki who came, but I didn't expect it to be these two guys. Thank you for the compliment." Sasuke's tone remained calm, but one could hear the respect in his words. Upon hearing these rather humble words, Boruto's eyes almost popped out. "Is this still the same arrogant master?" Zangief said with a smile. "I don't know whether you will win the award or not, but your strength lives up to your name." After joking for a while, his gaze fell on Boruto standing beside him. When he saw this boy, Hoshino Kaede's tone became obviously full of disgust. "You are quite capable. Why did you accept such a disciple?" Boruto was about to refute when he heard this, but he suddenly felt cold all over. He turned his head stiffly and immediately met Sasuke's deep eyes. He decisively admitted defeat and lowered his head. Seeing this scene, Zangief also laughed unkindly. "Everything has its own strength. This kid must be giving you a headache. It seems that he is not a quiet person, just like my little apprentice." After saying that, seeing Sasuke hesitated to speak, he smiled and said, "Just say what you want to say. There are no so many rules." He paused, looked at Boruto, and raised an eyebrow. "Except for you, of course. Children should behave themselves when adults are talking." HMPH. Boruto looked dissatisfied and snorted heavily to express his dissatisfaction. "However, that's all I can say. It's really just that the words were spoken lightly and I can't say anything about them." Sasuke organized his words and explained the whole story and the degree of danger. Hoshino Kaede listened carefully and then briefly repeated, "What it means is that Urashiki wanted the tailed beast, so he set his sights on the nine tails, but since he couldn't get it in your time, he ran to the past. Is that right?" Sasuke nodded and said solemnly, "If he gets the nine tails, the consequences will be disastrous. He will definitely come over." Zangief nodded, and then asked, "Were you very strong in your era?" "According to what you said, the man called Urashiki is already at the pseudo six paths level. Even with such strength, they were not able to succeed. Konoha seems to be very powerful." When Sasuke heard this, a hint of pride appeared on his face, and he looked at Hoshino Kaede with even more admiration because only those who have experienced that era know how powerful this Hokage's methods and long-term vision are. Boruto, who has always been treated as an invisible person, couldn't help but say, "That's natural. Konoha is the only country in the ninja world. Strong people emerge endlessly, including my father." Boruto showed a proud expression when talking about his father. When Hoshino Kaede heard this, her heart moved and she carefully savored the information contained in Boruto's words. "Only? Haha, it seems my plan has not failed." "That's right, if it fails, I might as well just go into the factory." Seeing Boruto's proud look, Hoshino Kaede said in a stern voice, "Why are you so proud?" "It's not you." Boruto's face immediately fell, and he said bitterly, "Did I provoke you?" Zangief spread his hands and said, "No, but," he stretched out his tone and rubbed his head vigorously. "I think it's fun to tease you." Boruto's mouth twitched and his face turned pale and blue. Perhaps Sasuke felt guilty because this was his own apprentice, so he coughed lightly and changed the subject. "Can you beat Urashiki?" Zangief did not expose his little thoughts, and looked at him meaningfully. "It seems that I should have rarely taken action at that time, otherwise, you wouldn't say such things." Sasuke was stunned, but then said calmly, "After you helped unify Konoha, you rarely appeared in public." After saying that, he looked at Boruto and said, "At least the children of Boruto's generation have never seen you." Zangief suddenly realized, "No wonder this kid doesn't recognize me." Boruto heard the conversation between the two and asked in confusion, "Is the third Hokage very powerful?" Zangief touched his chin and said, "Everyone has their own definition of being awesome. Others think I'm awesome, but I think I'm pretty weak." When Sasuke heard this, the corners of his mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but feel ashamed and complain in his heart. What you said implicitly despises everyone equally, but he just said this in his heart. He looked at Boruto and explained, "The unification of Konoha is the result of decades of hard work and efforts by the third Hokage. This kind of thing is on the first page of history class. You haven't even opened the book." Boruto seemed to have been hit on the heart of the matter, and laughed guiltily, "Sorry, I haven't turned it over once." Chapter 179 And polite guests are not welcome here. Hoshino Kaede looked at Sasuke sympathetically. "Taking care of this child is really difficult for you," but then a smile appeared on his face, and his eyes seemed to see the future through the present. "However, this kind of personality is probably closely related to the times." Sasuke nodded in admiration and said, "There has been peace for too long, which has caused this generation of ninjas to lack some bloodiness. Boruto is already pretty good." "Really? Things are never absolute. The benefits of peace are obvious, but the disadvantages are like the darkness and the shadows, slowly spreading." Zangief was not surprised by this, or rather, he had already expected it, but these drawbacks cannot affect his determination. Perfection never exists. He can only try his best to change and control it. Boruto was confused and scratched his head. "Teacher, what are you talking about?" Sasuke glanced at him and said calmly, "I said you have no blood." Boruto glared at him and couldn't help but retort, "Sasuke-sensei, it's you who always thinks in the past." "Wow, this kid wants to make a big fuss." Zangief opened his eyes slightly, a little surprised as soon as Boruto said this. He actually felt a little regretful in his heart. After all, he was his teacher, but he didn't notice that after hearing these words, the corners of Sasuke's mouth rose slightly, and then quickly disappeared. Hoshino smiled dumbly and shook his head. He was so dishonest. He always kept things in his heart and didn't know how to express himself. Ahem, excuse me. Let's put aside the clash of ideas between the two generations for now. Shouldn't the most important thing now be Urashiki? Zangief smiled slightly and changed the subject implicitly to avoid the meaningless argument at this moment. Hearing this, Boruto took over the conversation smoothly and nodded repeatedly. "Yes, this is not the time to discuss." After saying that, he glanced at Sasuke cautiously out of the corner of his eye. Sasuke didn't think too much about it and nodded immediately. "Then what should we do?" When the solution was mentioned, the two of them looked at Kid Hoshino at the same time. After all, he was the Hokage and had absolute say in Konoha, but they didn't know that the two of them were placing their hopes on the most unreliable person at a moment. Zangief supported his chin with his hands and began to think hard. The two of them waited quietly for 2 hours, which passed in the blink of an eye. How long do I have to think about this?" Boruto looked mad. He was already patient enough to wait until now. An ordinary person would have started cursing long ago. Zangief's thoughts were interrupted, and he chuckled. "I've finished thinking." Boruto looked expectant and asked, "What's the solution?" Zangief said honestly, "Cold." "Sasuke." "Boruto, what do you mean?" Boruto had a bad feeling. "Sure enough," Zangief said with a smile, "that is to say, there is no way at the moment." Boruto almost stumbled and fell to the ground, and said with a crying face, "Then why did you think about it for so long?" Zangief couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. "That Urashiki has indeed come to this era. I just sensed the fluctuations in space, but it was only for a moment, and it disappeared very quickly. It must have hidden itself." Boruto heard the voice and asked, "Why are you hiding?" Sasuke looked over when he heard that, and it was obvious that he wanted to know too. Zangief chuckled. His smile was unfathomable. "Of course. I gave him a big gift. I wanted to trap him, but I didn't expect he had some strength and broke free from the cage I set." The more Boruto listened, the more shocked he became. No way, was there something wrong with his ears? This guy was clearly still here, so how could he be fighting with Urashiki? Moreover, his tone sounded as if Urashiki could be easily controlled. Although Sasuke was also surprised, he quickly returned to normal. He knew more than Boruto and had some idea of Hoshino Kaede's strength. "Can you find him?" Sasuke asked. Zangief thought for a moment and said, "It's not difficult to find him, but I need to prepare." This is of course an excuse. A strong man like Urashiki is like a bright light in the darkness of the ninja world. It would be hard not to pay attention, especially when he was escaping. He deliberately made a backup plan and cast a ray of time breath on him. In this way, even if he escapes to the ends of the earth, he can quickly locate his position. "I'm leaving first. You can move around as you like. Remember to change your clothes. Hoshino Feng smiled and said, as for whether it would disrupt time and space, well, just erase the memory when you go back. After saying that, he paused for a moment and looked at Boruto meaningfully. Oh, you can experience this era well, maybe you will gain something. After he finished speaking, Zingai Feng's figure flashed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. For a moment, Sasuke and Boruto were the only ones left in the pub. After a brief silence, Sasuke looked at Boruto. Master Hoshino is right, you should go and see the people of this era, it will be good for you. Boruto nodded. Even if they didn't tell him, he would go and take a look. I have heard a lot from my elders about it in the past, and now that I can see it with my own eyes, I naturally want to experience it for myself. 2 hours ago, in a remote forest hundreds of miles away from Konoha, violent energy fluctuations caused ripples in space. Soon, a click sound was heard, and a vortex appeared out of nowhere, and a figure stepped out of it. The time span is too long. This is not the time when that person was a child. The man had light blue hair and pale skin, which revealed his identity. This man was Otsutsuki Urashiki. There is no warmth in those pure white eyes, only coldness. At first glance, he seems to be a cold person, but the fluctuating emotions in his opening words broke this notion. Cold yet affectionate. These two contradictory feelings appear in one person at the same time, which is really weird. Never mind, but it doesn't matter, as long as it's the Kyuubi. Urashiki disagreed and looked towards Konoha, where his target was. Then, blood appeared in his eyes, but it was not the Sharingan. Sixth Magatama slowly rotated in his eyes, and a black vortex appeared in front of him. Pushi smiled slightly and was about to step in when he was suddenly struck by a feeling of rejection, blocking him outside. Who? Pushi shouted, and at the same time, a tremendous pressure emerged, blowing the surrounding grass, trees, and gravel all over the place. Tisk. The Otsutsuki clan members are really arrogant and incompetent. They come to other people's worlds without even saying hello. You really don't take me seriously. The frivolous voice of Hoshino Kaede sounded faintly from behind Urashiki, which startled Urashiki so much that cold sweat dripped from his forehead, and he turned around instantly. Zingai Feng smiled slightly. His smile was so gentle, but his hands moved quickly as he spoke. Impolite guests are not welcome here. Chapter 180. Abandoning the treasure and escape. There was a fair slide in Hoshino Kaede's eyes, and a strong aura gushed out, instantly locking onto Urashiki. Endless laws of time surround the body, exuding a mysterious feeling. Pushi felt a chill in his heart, as if he was the prey being stared at by a lion, and his mind was frightened. After a brief moment of distraction, Pushi flipped his hand and a fishing rod emitting red light appeared in his palm. He swung it with all his strength at random, and in an instant, countless phantoms of fish hooks whizzed towards Zingai Feng like bows and arrows. In just 1 second, he was within 10 feet of Zingai Feng. Zingai Feng smiled slightly, his eyes flashing with brilliance, and the attacks around him seemed to be frozen, floating in mid-air. Seeing this, Pushi's eyes became solemn. He immediately took out a pill and swallowed it. His expression gradually became confident and conceited. The already powerful momentum suddenly rose to a higher level, and the aura of the pseudo-six paths was released without reservation. Under Urashiki's deliberate plan, he rushed towards Zingai Feng like a tidal wave, as if trying to get back some ground. But unfortunately, the extremely powerful momentum seemed to be overwhelming towards Zingai Feng at the beginning, but the closer it got, the weaker the aura became. Not even the last wave rose. Pills? There's a reason why the Otsutsuki clan dominates the universe. Hoshino Kaede raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but sigh. Although he had expected it, Feng Zingai was still a little surprised when he actually saw it. After all, who wouldn't be shocked to hear that taking a pill can improve one's strength without any side effects? Of course, the most crucial thing is Otsutsuki's special physique and his own strength, and the elixir is just the icing on the cake. Urashiki was on high alert, staring at Hoshino Kaede the whole time, and at the same time he was terrified. The fact that such a powerful person was born in such a desolate land really shattered his three views. The power of the laws on that person made him extremely wary, and he dared not show his usual leisurely attitude in front of him. The next moment, Hoshino Feng moved. With a thud, he split into two clones, surrounding Urashiki in a triangle. Urashiki's pupils suddenly shrank. In his eyes, in addition to the laws on Hoshino Kaede, the other two clones also emerged with their own laws. Seal. Zingai Feng clasped his hands together, his aura surged, and he shouted in a deep voice. In an instant, as if the world had changed, three figures simultaneously burst out with the strength of the six paths level and gathered together above the sky. A word seal covered the sky and the sun. Under the control of Zingai Feng, It slowly descended and suppressed Urashiki. After doing all this, Xingai Feng's body began to become illusory, as if he had roots without wings and would eventually disappear. This is just the incarnation of Xingai Feng. Although his strength is exactly the same as his real body, he is just an incarnation after all and can only rely on energy to maintain his body shape. Once too much power is consumed, this incarnation will disappear. The powerful suction force made Pushi unable to move. His entire skeleton seemed to be squeezed, his handsome appearance disappeared completely, and he looked extremely embarrassed. So strong, Pushi held on tightly, as if every word was squeezed out of his throat before disappearing. Xingai Feng thought that nothing would go wrong. However, the Otsutsuki have never been a group of simple guys, and their courage is much stronger than that in the anime. When Urashiki saw that Hoshino Kaede's figure was gradually becoming illusory, he understood clearly that this was not his real body. This way, we get two pieces of news, one good and one bad. The good news is that after surviving this full-strength attack, he will be safe and sound. The bad news is that this attack is very powerful. If he cannot take it, he will stay in this wild land forever, and it is unknown when the seal will be broken. Thinking of this, Urashiki felt extremely complicated. He wondered when his Otsutsuki clan had ever been so miserable. Even when we attacked the gods, the situation was not so critical, but there is no point in thinking too much now. We have to get through this critical moment before we can talk about the future. Pushi took a deep breath and looked at the fishing rod in his hand with a slight reluctance, but only for a moment. After making up his mind, he silently said, "Explode." Boom! A brilliant red light suddenly burst out, and waves of heat swept across. Seeing this, Xingai Feng, who was about to disappear, shook his head slightly. He knew that the chance was gone. The seemingly ordinary fishing rod, under Urashiki's control, burst out with a massive amount of energy. The space that should have been stable was caused to become violently turbulent, and the energy fluctuations generated allowed Pushi to catch his breath. Although it seems short, it is enough. The moment Urashiki sensed the turbulence, he immediately opened the 6 Magneto Samsara Eye. When the special turbulence affected him, his body instantly split into thousands of red paper cranes, and then disappeared out of thin air. In a few breaths, Pushi disappeared without a trace. The word seal that was supposed to befall Pushi could only fall to the ground. At this moment, the powerful force created a vacuum zone in the center, which then spread out in all directions within a radius of 100 miles. In just a breath of time, no grass grew, and the land became desolate. The remaining power of the law made it impossible for this land to have any life for the next 100 years. It can be seen that the power of Hoshino Kaede's attack made Urashiki flee in panic, even abandoning his fishing rod. Back to the present, at the suggestion of Kaede, Hoshino, Sasuke and Boruto changed into clothes that were suitable for the current situation and walked onto the street. Looking at Konoha decades ago, Boruto scratched his head, feeling a little uncomfortable. It is easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. After being used to electronic products, he suddenly went back to the era of handicrafts, which made him quite uncomfortable. This era, according to what my father said, should be the time for Konoha to accumulate strength, Sasuke explained. I can see that things were quite primitive at that time. There wasn't even any means of transportation. Boruto followed Sasuke and continued to move forward. People came and went on the road, but there were no mechanical creatures. I don't know what there is to play with. With the nature of a child, he became restless after a while. Wait, why does that figure seem familiar? Boruto narrowed his eyes. A figure not far away made him feel a sense of familiarity. Sasuke followed the line of sight and was startled. Just as he was about to speak, Boruto next to him immediately took action. How impatient! You're worthy of being Naruto-san. Sasuke shook his head helplessly, but still followed behind him. Minato Namikaze is only 12 years old now and has just graduated from the ninja school a few months ago. In fact, with his ability, he could have graduated long ago, but because of Kushina, his graduation was delayed. Minato, I want to leave the village for a mission. Kushina looked at Minato with a resentful look. Minato immediately wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said with a wry smile, it's no use telling me, the Hokage won't let you out. HMPH, that stinky uncle, he still says that after graduation. Kushina waved her fist indignantly, clenched it hard, and looked angry. Minato's mouth twitched, and he could only comfort her in a kind voice. At this time, Boruto's voice came and greeted them. Hello. Chapter 181. Seeing through the future. Minato turned around, scratched his head, and even though he didn't know the man, he still greeted him in a friendly manner. Hello. After saying that, he looked at Boruto in confusion and asked, You are not from Konoha, right? Boruto was stunned for a moment, Then he gave a thumbs up and praised, "Sugoi. I'm from another village, and I'm traveling here with my teacher." Kushina raised an eyebrow and interrupted, "Traveling? Do you guys have that much free time?" At this time, Sasuke came over and spoke up to help Naruto out of the predicament. "This kid is naturally cheerful and always looks heartless. Don't bother with him, teacher," Naruto shouted angrily, his face slightly red. Not giving any face at all, Sasuke ignored it and continued, "We are wandering ninjas who came to Konoha to escort a caravan. I have to say that being handsome really allows you to do whatever you want." Sasuke's face is attractive to both young and old. When Kushina heard Sasuke's explanation, she immediately believed it, which shocked Naruto deeply. Minato scratched his head and comforted Kushina. "She is not usually like this, sorry." Naruto waved his hand generously, and regained his vitality in a moment, saying energetically, "It's okay, I don't care." Minato's eye twitched and he looked down at his clenched fists and shook his head. Duplicity, but this was just a minor episode. Minato smiled very brightly and then introduced himself. "My name is Minato Namikaze, thank you for your guidance." As Konoha became so powerful, the control over merchants became very strict and no longer as easy as before, not to mention letting stray ninjas into the village. Those who were allowed to enter the village had all been confirmed to be harmless after tedious investigations, so Minato was not worried that the two people in front of him were spies from other countries or criminals. This was the confidence brought by Konoha's strength. Naruto was taken aback to hear Minato's enthusiasm, but he quickly responded, "My name is Namikaze, ahem, no, my name is Naruto." Just as Naruto was about to say his full name, Sasuke quickly slapped him from behind and said without changing his expression, "There is a mosquito." Suddenly, the words in his mouth were swallowed back, as if a racing car suddenly braked and turned a wide corner. But even though Sasuke interrupted Naruto in time, the distance was so close and Minato was not deaf, so he naturally heard clearly what Naruto said before he changed his words. Minato looked at Naruto deeply, his brows furrowed. "Namikaze?" This last name, a brainstorm was sweeping his mind. There were very few people with the surname Namikaze, and before him, there was none at all in the ninja world, except for the nobles who have surnames passed down from generation to generation. The common people choose their own surnames, and the person in front of him also had the surname Namikaze, which made Minato cautious. Apart from this, what he cares about most is Naruto's appearance. If you look closely, you can find that he is somewhat similar to you. There can be no such coincidence in the world. Same last name, similar looks, all signs indicate that this seems to be hinting at something. Sasuke saw all of Minato's deep thoughts and the changes in his expression. He shook his head secretly inside. Sure enough, the clues were discovered, but that's true, it's too obvious after all. Sasuke glanced at the two of them casually. If anyone looked at them for too long, they would have noticed something was wrong. Seeing that the atmosphere was tense, Kushina was silent for a long time, and asked in confusion, "Why are you all silent?" After hearing this, Minato finally came back to his senses, temporarily suppressed the speculation in his mind, and smiled. "I was distracted just now, sorry." After that, he looked at Sasuke and Naruto and invited them. "This is your first time in Konoha, right? If that's okay, we can show you around." Naruto looked at Sasuke with a questioning look, and after receiving a positive answer, he said, "Please give me your guidance." Both sides reached a consensus. Minato and Kushina walked in front, and Naruto and Sasuke followed behind. "Teacher, why are you following them?" Naruto asked in a low voice. Just now, Sasuke used his eyes to signal him to agree, and he was quite eager. Sasuke said calmly, "Because the Kyuubi is on them." Naruto suddenly realized what was going on. No wonder Sasuke, who usually didn't like to join in the fun, would agree so eagerly after learning the reason. Naruto became more concerned and approached him enthusiastically to ask questions. After touring the customs and culture of this era, Minato suddenly asked, "Who are you?" In an instant, the cheerful and joyful atmosphere took a sharp turn for the worse, as if the scorching sun had instantly turned into cold moonlight. Hearing this, Naruto nervously took 2 steps back, but bumped into Kushina before he knew it. Naruto had been surrounded and attacked from both sides. The sudden change made Naruto's nerves tense, and cold sweat broke out on his back. He pretended to be stupid and said, "What are you talking about? Why don't I understand?" Sasuke shook his head. "Isn't this just confessing himself?" Then he stood up and said, "No need to hide it. He already knows." Naruto didn't turn the corner and asked blankly, "What do you know?" Sasuke held his forehead helplessly and looked at Minato. "Your reaction just now has explained everything." He just gave the final confirmation. Minato smiled upon hearing this, Everything was self-explanatory. Boruto immediately realized that he was being played, his face turned red, and he was about to open his mouth to protest, but he was suddenly hit hard on the head, and he screamed in pain. Kushina blew on her fist and said with an indignant look on her face, "This brat is actually our grandson, how shameful." During the tour, Minato told Kushina all his guesses. She was shocked at the time. After observing for a while, she felt that this kid was a little rash and had no vigilance at all. Minato's forehead was dripping with sweat, and he said, "Kushina, you hit me a little too hard, save some strength, he's our grandson after all." When Boruto heard Minato's words, he was immediately moved and thought that this grandfather was not bad, but within a few seconds, he heard Minato say, "He's not smart to begin with, and if he's beaten, he's even more hopeless." A black line slid down Boruto's forehead, and his heart felt as if it was pierced by thousands of arrows. Hearing this, Kushina snorted softly, agreeing with his statement. Minato smiled, then looked at Sasuke, who had been observing from the side. "You came back from the future to the past, it must be something important." As if he had expected this, Sasuke nodded and explained, "It's for the Nine Tails." Finally, he felt that this statement was a little inappropriate, so he explained. "Someone took a fancy to it, so he came to the past." Minato was suddenly shocked. It was the Nine Tails. He immediately looked at Kushina, his eyes filled with worry. Seeing this, Sasuke said, "But the third Sama has already gone to take care of it, so there won't be any problems." Hearing that the Hokage already knew about it and went to solve it, Minato felt relieved. That's good. Lord Hokage has never failed when he has taken action. Chapter 182. The times are progressive. After his restless heart calmed down, Minato looked at Boruto again, with tenderness in his eyes. After all, they are his descendants, so naturally they are close by blood. Looking him up and down, he asked curiously, "Has Konoha been at peace for a long time? You looked even worse than a Shinin just now." Minato naturally knew that where there was pressure there would naturally be motivation. A comfortable life will inadvertently erode people's fighting spirit. Children born in wartime are different from children born in peacetime. This is true both in terms of thinking and in terms of habits. Hearing this, Boruto felt ashamed. He had seen a lot along the way and he suddenly realized how relaxed he had been before. Kushina said disdainfully, "Kid, peace is good, but you can never be content with the status quo. Once you lose the instinct to fight, you will always stay where you are. It may even lead to devastating disaster in the end." At this point, a look of pain flashed across Kushina's face, and the scene of the destruction of the Whirlpool country came to her mind. What happened back then is still deeply engraved in her mind. That feeling of powerlessness, that sadness. If it weren't for Konoha's help, the Uzumaki clan would have been buried in some corner of the long river of history. It is precisely because the Whirlpool country is content with the status quo and turns a blind eye to the obvious crisis that it has suffered disastrous consequences. Minato saw Kushina's sudden drop in mood, saw the sadness brewing in her eyes, and suddenly understood what she was thinking. He spoke in comfort, "It's all in the past. It's just a memory now. The Uzumaki clan is still here." Boruto is a complete novice when it comes to history and is a little confused, so he looks to Sasuke for help. Sasuke was used to this, but still said with a hint of helplessness, "The Whirlpool country was coveted by other countries at the time because of its advanced sealing techniques, and they united to seize it. In the end, thanks to Konoha's timely assistance, the Uzumaki clan was able to survive. Although they were badly damaged, they were still there, and later joined Konoha." Upon learning of this long history of war, Boruto seemed to see the mountains of corpses and seas of blood reappearing, with cries and wailing sounds endless in his ears and his eyes. He saw the country being destroyed and the family being ruined, being bullied and exploited by the enemy, and being plundered without restraint, just like fish and shrimp, being taken away at will. A chill surged into my heart, my throat became extremely dry, and I didn't know what to say for a moment. Sasuke rubbed his head and looked straight ahead, his eyes firm. The peace that our ancestors longed for was created by countless people fighting in a sea of blood. This life is not easy to come by, and it comes at a heavy price. As Sasuke spoke these heavy words, the atmosphere became extremely oppressive, as if one was carrying a mountain on his back. Boruto lowered his head, completely losing his usual liveliness, like an old man in his twilight years, his mind full of heavy and trivial thoughts. At this moment, Zingai Feng appeared with Shenyu, and when he saw the strange atmosphere, he tilted his head. "What are you doing?" When Sasuke saw Kid Hoshino, he bowed his head slightly to show respect. Hearing this, Minato couldn't help but touch his nose and told the story. "Well, I don't mind talking about these things." Hoshino Kaede glanced at Boruto, who was struggling internally, and shook her head. "But it's not appropriate now. After saying that, he looked at Sasuke and said, "It's okay for him, as a teacher, to say these things." He turned his gaze to Minato and Kushina, his eyes meaningful. "What about you? In what capacity, grandpa or grandma?" Zingai Feng's gaze made their faces turn red. They immediately lowered their heads, not daring to look at each other. Each generation is definitely stronger than the previous one. "This is what I firmly believe." Hoshino Kaede shook her head and spoke as she knocked Boruto unconscious and handed him to Sasuke. "Since we have such a habit, it is caused by our living environment. If a few words can change things, then I'll be much more relaxed and won't need to plan so much. Just talk nonsense." As Zingai Feng spoke, he couldn't help but chuckle. Everyone knows the truth, but how many people can actually put it into practice? This kid is quite talented. His future potential is very high. As for his future potential, I can't tell. There seemed to be the cycle of life and death and the falling of stars in Zingai Feng's eyes. The combination of time and space allowed him to see a glimpse of fate through the layers of fog, but it was not real, just a picture. Fate is the most illusory existence. To some extent, it is even more mysterious than time because time can also be symbolized by clocks and watches. It is real, but fate is invisible and intangible. It seems to exist everywhere, but also like a dream bubble. It's Boruto's honor to receive your evaluation. Although Sasuke had a stern face, the joy between his brows was fleeting. It can be seen that he cares about Boruto. "Okay, enough small talk, now it's time to get down to business." Hoshino Kaede changed the subject. "I found that guy Urashiki. Next, it's time to deal with this uninvited guest." Zingai Feng's eyes flickered fiercely, an unknown smile appeared on his face, and then he looked at Shenyu. "The growth cycle of the gods is very long, and they are immortal species like the Otsutsuki. He is even longer lived than the Otsutsuki. So his height has not increased at all in the past few years. His appearance was still childish, but although his outward appearance had not changed, the past few years of getting along with him made him no longer cold all day long. He has become friends with Shiraishi and Ritsu, and his temperament is no longer superior at first glance. He looks like an ordinary child, in the feud between the Otsutsuki and the gods. Do you want to get some interest back first?" Shinju's eyes were filled with hatred, his teeth were chattering, as if he wanted to eat Urashiki alive. "I have to become stronger, strong enough to fight against them." Zingai Feng rubbed his head and said thoughtfully, "This universe is now dominated by the Otsutsuki. In fact, it has nothing to do with any who is in charge, but, sooner or later, the ninja world will confront them. Everyone will covet the vitality of a planet. For the Otsutsuki, planets are resources, and resources can be transformed into elixirs that can make them instantly stronger. So, from the very beginning, the Otsutsuki were his mortal enemies. Here, there are people he cherishes, and he will never sit idly by and wait for death. This pushi can be used to ease the hatred in your heart." Hoshino Feng stroked the soft hair on Shenayu's head and made a decision in one word. Then, he looked at Sasuke and said, "You don't have to participate. Take Boruto to look at it for a while now. After this is over, I will erase your memory." After he finished speaking, he paused and looked at Minato and the other man, "Including you." Upon hearing this, Kushina said reluctantly, "Can't we save it?" Zingai Feng shook his head decisively, "No, time and space have their own rules." He looked up at the sky, his eyes became deep, and through the clouds, his sight came to a mysterious place. There is the core of the ninja world, the so-called Heavenly Way. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183. Uchiha Madara comes again. As a general rule, every world has its own way of heaven, but in the ninja world, there is no such thing. To be more precise, the conception was successful, but there is no awareness because the rules are imperfect. They cannot reach the boundary of consciousness, and since Zingai Feng went to comprehend the dragon veins and filled in some gaps, he was able to awaken successfully. The flaws in the ninja world were further improved, and the laws of time and space became more solid. Just now when he was spying on Boruto's fate, the Heavenly Way consciousness warned him. After all, he is the son of the protagonist, and his fate cannot be pried into or searched at will. Besides, he originally came from the future and didn't belong here. Minato squeezed Kushina's hand and consoled her. "We'll see each other again sooner or later." Hoshino Kaede raised his eyebrows and looked at Minato's actions with amusement. This guy is quite good at finding opportunities. His EQ and IQ are not low. It seems that Kushina has found a boyfriend. The burning gaze remained fixed on Minato, making him feel uncomfortable for a moment, as if he had lice all over his body. However, Zingai Feng just took a glance and didn't pay any more attention to it. It's not good for others to interfere in matters of the heart. Let's go. Zingai Feng turned to Shen Yu and said, then waved his hand. A whirlpool appeared out of nowhere, and without hesitation, he entered directly with Divine Feather. After the two disappeared, Minato looked at Sasuke and the other man and told them to follow him home. I have heard, one step covers 1,000 miles, and it only takes a moment now. Zingai Feng can do it with just a thought, and can even lead others to cross over. After walking out of the whirlpool, looking around, Zingai Feng smiled and said, this Urashiki is quite cautious. He must have expected this. It seems that he doesn't want to sit there and wait for death, and he actually found help. With a casual glance, Zingai Feng understood with his current perception, nothing in the ninja world can escape his perception. In addition to Urashiki, there is another hidden figure. Clap clap. The next moment after he finished speaking, a round of applause came from the shadows, followed by the figure of Pushi. Compared with his previous embarrassing escape, he was elegant and confident at this moment, as if he was in control of the situation. Zingai Feng sneered, you are like this, which makes me feel very uncomfortable. Just because you found a helper, does that make you so confident? Pushi curled his lips and did not respond, but changed his topic. I just came here not long ago, everything here is unfamiliar. You are indeed very powerful. I have no chance to resist your clone. Now that your real body has come, I am even less of a match for you. Zingai Feng looked up at him. So, you want to surrender? Urashiki shook his head. The Otsutsuki clan has never surrendered. Zingai Feng looked behind him and said, then what do you want to do? Pushi covered his face, one eye showing through his fingers, and laughed wildly. I want to take a gamble, with my own life as the bet. The previous elegance suddenly changed, becoming desperate and crazy. Zingai Feng sighed, scratched his head in embarrassment, and looked at Shen Yu. This guy really knows how to give me problems. What do you think I should do? Shen Yu said without hesitation, as long as he dies, the rest will have to stand back. Zingai Feng nodded after hearing this, then looked at Urashiki and asked a question. I know what you want to do, but why do you think I will fulfill your wish? If you lose the bet, you will have nothing. Pushi's bet is divided into two parts. One part is that he bets that Zingai Feng will not take advantage of the situation. The other part is to bet on whether the person he relies on last can kill him. It can be said that the probability of this is lower than winning the lottery, but the reality is that Urashiki put all his money into the bet. This is a desperate person who has a courage that others do not have. Haha, knowing that I will die, I might as well bloom brilliantly. Even if it's only for a moment, it's still a struggle. I have no regrets. Pushi has lived for so many years that he can no longer care about life and death. At this moment Zingai Feng slowly closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them, a sense of fighting spirit rising from his heart. Okay, since you have this intention, I will fulfill it. I hope you won't let me down in the end. Pushi heard this and laughed. I'm afraid you will regret it in the end. After saying that, he turned his head and looked behind him, saying, aren't you coming out yet? Zingai Feng followed his gaze and saw a person walking out of the woods. His body is weak, his breath is as tiny as a candle flame, and the activity of his body cells is like that of a dying person with sunken eye sockets. A pair of reincarnation eyes stared straight at Zingai Feng, with either emotion, or relief, or high fighting spirit. Zingai Feng knew who he was from the beginning, but until he appeared in front of him, he couldn't help but feel quite emotional. Madara-senpai, you were full of energy and spirit in the past, walking side by side with your teacher. You look like a ninja, so you don't have any divine power. The old-looking Uchiha Madara was dismissive of these words, but he praised Hoshino Kaede himself. You kid, I scared you a lot at first, but I wasn't wrong about you. Konoha is in your hands. You are countless times stronger than Hashirama. Madara was very arrogant and never looked at Kaede Hoshino straight in the eye before he made achievements, but as time went by, he couldn't help but admire it with his vision. How could he not see the potential and ambition hidden in Konoha? In time, it will be as easy for Konoha to dominate the ninja world as cutting melons and vegetables. A black line slid down Hoshino Kaede's forehead, and he couldn't help but recall the scene when he first met Uchiha Madara. At that time, he was a rookie who had just become Hashirama's disciple and knew nothing, but now when I think about it, I feel a little nostalgic. After the battle at the Valley of the End, I knew we would meet again someday. But I didn't expect it to be so soon, Hoshino Kaede said with a smile on his face. Uchiha Madara frowned when he heard this. You know I'm not dead, of course. I also know about the so-called Moon Eye plan. Zingai Feng said with a smile. Uchiha Madara's eyes suddenly became sharp, and a domineering aura that had been dormant for a long time emerged. How do you know? He had never mentioned this plan before, so there was no possibility of it being leaked. There was a radiant light flowing on the fingertips of Zingai Feng, and when his 5 fingers were spread out, it seemed as if the 4 seasons were passing and there were the sun, moon and stars. I saw it in the future. Hoshino Feng smiled and said casually. Uchiha Madara's expression froze, and gradually became gloomy. Good trick. He almost forgot that the person in front of him had the ability to control time, so it was not impossible for him to capture fragments of the future. It's just that, no bigger than yours. Using the ninja world as a chessboard and keeping everyone in the dark, he provoked wars among the villages, and even did not spare Konoha. Hoshino Kaede's tone gradually changed from being relaxed at the beginning to becoming murderous, and he pounced on Uchiha Madara without any concealment. I admire your contribution to Konoha, but I cannot tolerate you plotting against Konoha. Uchiha Madara laughed wildly and said, Good. Good. This is what a Hokage should be like. Let's see what he is really like. Chapter 184, Time and Space embrace one's own body, and 6 paths appear. The smell of decay seemed to be blown away a little by this arrogance. Hoshino Feng continued to smile. He turned to look at Urashiki and stood quietly by the side watching his performance. The power in Urashiki's body continued to weaken and condense, as if something was gestating. His strength, which was close to the 6 paths level, began to decline rapidly. Pseudo 6 paths, the peak of Super Shadow, half a step to Super Shadow. The extremely brutal aura gradually faded away, and at the same time, the body also changed and compressed. Just like molding a clay figure, it gradually turned into something shaped like a fruit. Suspended in the air, Hoshino Feng opened his eyes slightly and looked at the fruit in front of him curiously. Otsutsuki, what a weird race. Cannibalism is common. I really don't understand why people are so proud of this ability. The fruit was floating in the air, emitting a scarlet light from its interior, and strong energy fluctuations were coming from within. This fruit is the chakra fruit, which is not only unique to the sacred tree, but every member of the Otsutsuki clan can possess this ability. Suddenly, the fruit trembled twice, and then fell quickly into Uchiha Madara's hands. Power. I feel a powerful force. Uchiha Madara's eyes became fanatical, and he stroked it as if he were loving his own children. After a moment, he looked up at Hoshino Kaede and said, I heard that people in the ninja world call you the second god of ninja world. As he spoke, he laughed wildly, and said with a paranoid look in his eyes, let me see how strong you, a god, are. Then he swallowed the fruit into his stomach. It melted in the mouth and instantly decomposed into extremely rich vitality and power, rushing towards his limbs and bones like a tsunami. The originally dead cells once again came to life, and Uchiha Madara clearly felt that his strength, which had once declined, was rapidly returning. But not only that. The surging power swept through the limbs and rushed straight to the brain, and the reincarnation eyes in the eyes spun rapidly afterwards. 6 Magatama suddenly appeared, and the critical power seemed to be pushed by someone and went to a higher level. The withered branches sprouted new buds, and Uchiha Madara's old body became young again. The patterns on his face were faintly visible, and the 6 Tao-seeking jades behind him were moving along a specific trajectory. Uchiha Madara's original strength had already reached the peak of Super Shadow. Now that he had obtained all of Urashiki's power, it was natural for him to break through to the 6 paths. The overwhelming momentum soared into the sky. At this moment, Ban truly obtained the power of God. Come on, let me see you, the strongest in the world. Uchiha Madara floated in the air, wearing a yin-yang Taoist robe, with his arms open, as if accepting everyone. Zingai Feng narrowed his eyes. As you wish. As soon as he finished speaking, Zingai Feng's calm aura changed instantly, and a vast yet mysterious aura suddenly rose as Zingai Feng took a step forward. The 4 seasons rotate, time and space merge, heaven and earth are one. Turn me into a god. The pupils glowed with blue light, surrounding Zingai Feng. Looking down from the air, he saw an illusory gilded clock suddenly appear under his feet. The next moment, the clock turned into bubbles and merged into the body of Hoshino Kaede, which was different from the tremendous momentum of Uchiha Madara. This moment is very ordinary, just like a spring breeze passing by without leaving any trace. He turned time and space into his own use. At this moment, he had already broken through the 6 realms and entered a new realm. Liudeo, you finally broke through. You are really different. Zingai Feng opened his eyes that were as bright as stars, as if he contained the world in his eyes. He looked at himself and couldn't help but sigh. If Chaoyin was the master of the laws, then Liudeo could already use the laws for his own benefit. Every move he makes is based on the power of laws, and any other moves pale in comparison. After saying that, He flew into the air and stood opposite Uchiha Madara. I thought it would take some effort, but now it seems that it won't be necessary. He didn't expect to make a breakthrough in the middle of a battle, but he wasn't that surprised, because sometimes things just happen by coincidence. Uchiha Madara looked at him solemnly, thinking to himself, he is very strong, but I can't tell his depth. It's as if the person in front of me doesn't exist. There are also differences between the 6 paths level strongmen, like Uchiha Madara and Hoshino Kaede. The two are in the same realm, but their strengths are worlds apart. One is to integrate time and space into one's own existence, while the other relies on external forces to break through. The gap can be imagined, but even if the hope is slim, we have to give it a try. Uchiha Madara is not the kind of person who would sit there and wait for death. The gap is meant to be caught up, not to discourage people. Yin Yang? Tian Ai's Hangsing, Uchiha Madara took the first step. His eye power surged like a waterfall, and he drove the yin-yang escape technique into it. Suddenly, the sky darkened, as if a huge hand covered the sky and the earth, and then a meteorite with a diameter of 1 kilometer slowly fell. This scene was like the collapse of the sky, which brought deep shock to people. This meteorite is mixed with a yin and yang, and its weight and density are astonishing. Once it falls, everything around it will be annihilated and there will be no life. Even if you are at the super shadow level, you probably won't have the desire to resist and can only wait for death on the spot. Zingai Feng's eyes were as calm as water. As if the meteorite in front of him was no different from the stone in his hand, he stretched out his hand and waved it gently, and countless times surged and attached to the meteorite. Then, light years passed by in seconds, and the solid rock was eroded at a speed visible to the naked eye. Eventually it turns into the nourishment of nature, silently. HMPH, as expected, time is indeed a forbidden power. Uchiha Madara's expression did not change. Back then, Tobira's flying thunder god was not as delicate as you, which already gave countless people a headache. Hoshino Feng smiled slightly. In fact, it was the yellow flash in the future that really made flying thunder god famous. With just one move, he caused headaches for all the villages, and directly ordered that the mission could be abandoned if a yellow flash was encountered. But at this moment, he is more than 100 times stronger than the previous one. It can be said that this battle is completely one-sided, but Shura is always Shura, and Uchiha Madara has never given up. Even if you lose, you must lose with dignity. Zingai Feng naturally also saw the determination in his eyes, and felt admiration but also helplessness. Boom, boom, boom. The two of them had perfect understanding and started a new round of fierce fighting without any verbal communication. Every punch and kick contains endless power, and is shocking. They were like two meteors shining in the air, cutting through the sky at an astonishing speed and colliding in an instant. With his extraordinary strength, Hoshino Kaede can easily see through Uchiha Madara's every move and accurately grasp the fleeting opportunity. He suddenly swung a punch, hitting Uchiha Madara with a force as powerful as thunder. The latter was caught off guard and knocked flying, falling heavily to the ground with a loud bang. The earth shook violently, and countless gravel and dust flew everywhere. This earth-shaking scene shocked all the villages. Cough, cough, cough. Uchiha Madara crawled out of the ruins in a mess, his face covered in dust but not injured. However, he knew very well in his heart that the outcome of this battle had been decided, and he had not gained any advantage at all in the brief confrontation just now. If it weren't for Zingai Feng's intention to hold back, the battle would have ended with just one strike, right? Thinking of this, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but sigh secretly. After all, I am old, Hoshino Kaede. No, it's because I was too good at cheating. Chapter 185, Shura returns, moisturizing things silently. Is this the difference in strength? Uchiha Madara had never suffered such a big defeat since he became a ninja. Even the Battle of the Valley of the End back then was not like today. Zingai Feng was looking down from a high place, overlooking the earth like a god, looking at everything below with indifference in his eyes. In a moment, ripples all over the body spread out, and the blue light covered the sky, covering the entire sky. Gilded runes floated in the void. Each one was so gorgeous and mysterious, as if entering a mysterious place. You are not only the teacher's good friend, but also an elder. Zingai Feng spoke slowly, his voice falling from the sky, overwhelming the earth. The whole sky resounded with his words. His tone was calm, as if he was talking about an ordinary matter. But in light of what you have done and the damage you have caused to Konoha, I will take away everything from you. Hoshino Kaede calmly spoke about how to deal with Uchiha Madara, even though the person in front of him was at the same level as him. But as he controls the rules of time and space, he has the confidence to say this. As soon as he finished speaking, the runes in the void turned into illusory chains, which made a rattling sound and shot towards Uchiha Madara. After a long and fierce battle, Uchiha Madara had already exhausted most of his physical strength. Although he still had the energy to spare, he did not move, but stayed quietly where he was. He scanned the surrounding space with a sharp gaze and sneered, "You really have made every possible preparation?" After saying that, he looked up at the godlike person in the air, and asked a question with deep eyes but a hint of expectation. "Boy, Hashirama, can he come back?" With a whoosh, the chains entered the body. Thousands of chains shot into Uchiha Madara's body, and the seal was activated immediately. The rules of time and space entered his body and imprisoned his power. Not only his chakra, but even his body was blocked at this moment. Uchiha Madara is a completely ordinary person, even more fragile than Hanzo. Zingai Feng looked at the man who had an ordinary aura and was as ordinary as the wildflowers and weeds on the roadside, and nodded slightly. "Yes, it will happen. It won't be too far away." Hearing this, Uchiha Madara continued to laugh in a low voice. His body fell backwards, and he murmured with nostalgia in his eyes, "My dear friend, you have accepted a good disciple. I am not as good as you." With a thought, Zingai Feng came to Uchiha Madara's side in an instant and asked, "Where's Black Zetsu? Things are not completely over yet." Uchiha Madara is just the one who is pushed to the front, and the real mastermind hidden in the ninja world has not been caught yet. When it comes to conspiracy and intrigue, 10 Uchiha Madaras are not as good as it. When it comes to forbearance, even the entire ninja world combined cannot match it, having been lurking for thousands of years and planning until now. Hoshino Kaede is cautious about Black Zetsu. Hearing Kaede Hoshino's question, Uchiha Madara chuckled and an unknown light flashed in his eyes. "I never thought that I would be deceived and fooled one day." When Kaede Hoshino said this, Madara suddenly understood, and the fragments flashed through his mind again. "Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. You are not a god. You will grow old, die, get angry, and feel sad." Uchiha Madara looked at him with a complicated expression. Through Hoshino Kaede's face, he seemed to see the child who was frightened by him in the past. As time passed, the child grew up, stood at the top of the ninja world, and easily defeated him. "You're right, I'm not a god," Uchiha Madara said softly. "Never, for the ninja world." This day shook all directions and was a day worth remembering. The third Hokage of Konoha village fought against a former Shura of the ninja world. When this news spread, everyone's first reaction was impossible. Absolutely impossible. Didn't Uchiha Madara, the Shura of the ninja world, die at the hands of Senju Hashirama a long time ago? All of a sudden, all the villages issued emergency orders and made every effort to search for the authenticity of the source of the intelligence. As the news gradually spread, they sadly discovered that it was true because Hoshino Kaede openly brought Uchiha Madara into Konoha, as if he did it specifically for them to see. Except for the ordinary villagers who knew nothing, everyone in the village's top leaders and ninjas knew about it. A few days later, Hoshino Feng looked speechlessly at Uchiha Madara, who was still lingering around, and said unhappily, "It's been so long, why don't you leave? What are you doing staying here?" Uchiha Madara snorted coldly, did not reply, and of course had no intention of getting up and leaving. Zingai Feng gritted his teeth and turned his head away immediately, thinking out of sight, out of mind. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara curled the corners of his mouth and revealed a smug smile. Since he secretly returned to Konoha, he found that everything had become different. The villagers' hostility towards the Uchiha was greatly weakened, and the Uchiha's temper gradually became restrained. This was completely different from when he left, which amazed him greatly and made him very curious about Zingai Feng. "You brought me back. Those villages are extremely worried. Did they send anyone to Konoha these days?" Uchiha Madara spoke, the smile in his eyes still undiminished. It was the look of someone watching a show. Speaking of this, Zingai Feng glared at him fiercely. "I was so confused at the time that I actually agreed to you." Uchiha Madara looked at him provocatively. His eyes seemed to say, "What can you do to me?" Hoshino Kaede's fingers were shaking, and his face was full of anger, but Uchiha Madara looked at him with disdain and said, "Okay, can such a small matter give you a headache? Everyone in the world has this possibility except you. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me that you are the strongest in the ninja world? Those villages only dare to show their presence on the surface. If a fight really breaks out, I'll run faster than anyone else and be blown away by the wind." It's just that Feng Hoshino has a good temper. If it were him, he would have driven Susanoo to attack the door long ago. Zingai Feng covered her mouth to hide her embarrassment, looking distressed. "After all, I am also the Hokage. Can't you just give me some face?" Uchiha Madara gave him a look and let him savor it alone. Seeing this, Zingai Feng spread his hands and said with a helpless smile, "Don't go out recently. Let them satisfy their cravings, except for the Sand Village, which has self-awareness." The other three villages are all shouting very loudly. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara said with disdain in his eyes, "You are just too soft-hearted." In his opinion, It was totally unnecessary to use such a gentle method. Zingai Feng smiled and said, I like to be more cautious, even if it takes time. The gap between villages cannot be resolved by force. When we unify in the future, we must first resolve these things. As he spoke, his smile grew wider, and he looked in a certain direction and spoke meaningfully. Isn't the Sand Village a good example? Look, there are still smart people. That Feng Ying saw it clearly and relieved the pressure for me. Hashirama Senju sneered. Pressure? From the beginning to now, he had never seen any pressure on Hoshino Kaede. Just like a cat playing with a mouse, he treats them as his toys. Chapter 186, I still have family. The Sand Village is almost under your control. The economy and the lifeline of survival are in your hands. Are you worried? In the past few days, he has learned about all the policies and orders given by Zingai Feng since he took office. The more I watched, the more frightened I became. Their methods were unheard of in the ninja world, and they completely destroyed the Sand Village's will to resist without bloodshed. Konoha had money, food and water, but the Sand Ninja were short of supplies, and survival issues were always with them. This series of orders from Hoshino Kaede is equivalent to cutting off the firewood from under the pot. People need to eat and drink water, and these things are controlled by Konoha. It can be said that this indirectly shakes the foundation of the Sand Village. If we wait another 10 years, the Sand Ninja will have no power to resist, and the country will eventually be annexed. In response to this, Hashirama Senju couldn't help but shudder all over and felt frightened inside. It's still early, but you're right, those people are like meat on the chopping block to me. It's not just the Sand Ninja. Konoha has already begun making corresponding plans for other countries. The terrain of the Rock Village is similar to that of the Sand Village. There are many rocks and the terrain is steep, making it extremely inconvenient to travel. As for the Hidden Cloud Village, it's more troublesome and more martial. Zingai Feng smiled slightly and explained the geography and information analysis of each village. As if he knew them all, it is not difficult to see that the top leaders within Konoha have already vaguely sensed Kaede Hoshino's layout and are secretly infiltrating. Zingai Feng acquiesced to all this and let them do it. HMPH, this is so complicated and troublesome. Hashirama Senju folded his arms and snorted. Zingai Feng picked up the tea, smiled and took a sip to moisten his throat, then said, Wars between villages are never simple. Just like when you first proposed to simply destroy the other villages and unify Konoha, it was strongly opposed by everyone. Hearing this, Hashirama Senju's face suddenly darkened, as if he recalled some bad memories. He had proposed it to Hashirama in private, but was rejected outright. However, he did not give up and brought it up again in the meeting. The result was not surprising at all, and everyone still opposed it. Zingai Feng said calmly, in the past, no one in Konoha held the power. The power was dispersed. Everyone had their own ideas, and it was difficult to unify them. Even teachers are like this, so you have failed. But then, a gleam of light suddenly appeared in Zingai Feng's eyes. His sharp aura was fully revealed, and the ambition in his heart was ignited. He said with great confidence, but it's different now. Konoha's power is centralized and the whole is united. The country is rich and the people are strong. The army is strong and the horses are strong. The seedlings of the past have long since grown into towering trees. Hashirama Senju was in a daze. After a long while, he looked deeply at Hoshino Kaede and uttered a word as if expressing emotion. I now regret not competing with Hashirama for you. Zingai Feng joked, am I so popular? Hashirama Senju snorted, then stood up and said, just a casual remark, I'm leaving now. Zingai Feng smiled and said, where are you going? Do you want me to show you the way? No need. Hashirama Senju didn't even turn his head. Said this proudly and left quickly. Zingai Feng smiled and watched his departing back without saying a word until he disappeared. Sand Village, Kazakage building. The third Kazakage's eyes were uncertain, and his hands were tightly clenched on the report in front of him. There were bloodshot eyes, which showed how bad his mood was. He was on the verge of a rage. Konoha. What a great Konoha! This method is truly brilliant. Feng Ying gritted his teeth, his face grinned, but then he suddenly deflated like a balloon, and slumped in his chair, feeling extremely powerless. Because he found that he was powerless to do anything about it. The Sand Village has no chips at all to challenge Konoha, not even a single one. Just when he was feeling desperate and helpless, Chiyo walked in with a tired look on her face. The wind shadow has been suppressed. Hearing this news, Feng Ying smiled bitterly and said, thank you for your hard work. Chiyo shook her head and sighed, it's just some hard work, not worth mentioning. The current situation of the Sand Shinobi is very critical. As a veteran of the Sand Ninja Village, he witnessed the establishment and development of the Sand Ninja Village and is the oldest person in the village. Coming from her mouth, it shows how serious the situation is. Merchants in this country have no room to survive. Most of them are dependent on the Konoha caravans. If this continues, our economic lifeline will be cut off by other countries. Feng Ying's expression became even more bitter when he heard this, and he closed his eyes reluctantly. There are no tradable resources in the country, nothing except minerals, not to mention, we have paid war reparations over the years and have no extra money to support them. In the final analysis, Konoha's timing was too good. They had our throat firmly grasped. By the time we reacted, it was already too late. A sad atmosphere suddenly appeared out of nowhere and filled the entire room, becoming increasingly heavier. This kind of soft knife cutting flesh, making people watch the village perish before their eyes, is the most tormenting thing. Is there really no way to delay it? Feng Ying asked the elder a final question, but knowledge and experience cannot transform into resources. Chiyo frowned, and the gloom between her brows could not be dissipated. The Kazakage closed his eyes in pain, and the sand village was powerless to save the situation. Chiyo pondered for a long while, sighed deeply, raised her tired face and looked at Feng Ying and said, "The sand ninja will not be the last. Konoha's appetite is definitely not limited to this. Perhaps, the ninja world will be unified in the future." As soon as these words were spoken, Feng Ying's pupils shrank. The fact that he was unwilling to accept deep in his heart was dug out, and he remained silent because he had thought about all these things, but deep down he was unwilling to admit that the ninja world would be unified by Konoha. Chiyo didn't pause. She continued, "I think you should talk to that person." Hearing this, Feng Ying said in a hoarse voice, "What are you talking about? The sand ninja is just his prey. Would you feel guilty for stepping on an ant? No. If that's the case, why would he talk to me?" Chiyo shook her head, walked to the window and looked down, and said softly, "Even if Konoha swallows up the sand ninja, the process will not be easy, and there may even be resistance from the villagers. So, what you want to talk about is how to help Konoha calm people's hearts." When Feng Ying heard this, his eyes widened. This was no different from aiding the enemy. He couldn't help but ask, "Have you really given up? The sand village was founded by your husband, so you don't have any regrets at all." In the sand village, when it comes to feelings for the village, Chiyo is definitely more attached than anyone else. This is her life, created by her husband's hard work. To say so is equivalent to giving up years of persistence. Chiyo smiled slightly. The longer you live, the more you understand, and you know exactly what you want in your heart. Konoha's dominance is inevitable, and the fate of the sand ninjas cannot be changed by human power. In this case, holding on in vain will only save one more life. What's more, she paused for a moment and smiled lovingly, "I still have a family." After hearing this, Feng Ying remained silent for a long time. And then he sighed. Chapter 187. Three Shadows and Number 039, Secret Meeting. Kid Hoshino was completely unaware of the accident in the sand village. Even if she knew, she would probably just nod at this moment. In the Hokage building, Sasuke brought Naruto to Hoshino Kaede to say goodbye. "You're leaving so soon? Why don't you stay a little longer?" Zingai Feng said with a smile. Sasuke shook his head and said, "No, it's better to go back as soon as possible." Seeing his firm attitude, Zingai Feng nodded and said, "The memories of the rest of them have been erased by me. You can go back without worrying about any accidents." Sasuke nodded. If the future was known, it would not be the future. Boruto changed his usual personality and listened to the conversation between the two people very quietly, without any intention of interrupting. Hoshino Feng smiled slightly and rubbed his head hard, making his hair a mess like a chicken coop. "Not everyone has the same experience as you. Don't think too much about it. It's all in the past." After saying that, it seemed to have little effect. He looked at Sasuke with a headache and said, "This little guy needs someone to comfort him and not let him have any grudges." Sasuke sighed, "Always so worrying." Zingai Feng had a sly smile in his eyes. "Easy to deal with? I think you were more troublesome than him when you were a child." Sasuke's mouth twitched. He almost forgot that this person could see the future, but he was too proud to admit it, and said stubbornly, "You are mistaken." Hoshino Feng shrugged, with an expression that said "I understand," and did not expose him. After chatting for a few more words, Sasuke showed a sincere look and said, "Take care." Zingai Feng waved his hands and said impatiently, "Go away, we will meet again one day." After saying that, Sasuke took out the plow, opened the time and space channel, and took Boruto back to his own era. An event in the past and the future came to a successful conclusion. Hoshino Kaede chuckled softly, playing with a wooden kune in his hand. Boruto's head can be vaguely seen on it, with a smile on his face. "You bastard, you're thoughtful." The land of water, the hidden mist village, is shrouded in fog all day long. It seems much calmer because it is far away from the mainland, but the peaceful day was broken by a wave of people landing on the island. The Mizukage has the courage to greet us personally. A hearty voice came from the boat. The Mizukage remained calm and said calmly, "There's no need to test the wreckage. The hidden mist village is not so desolate as to set a trap. As for you, Kumagakure, you have tried several times to dethrone Konoha, but you never succeeded. You have suffered a lot because of this. I wonder if you have eased up now." After hearing this, the atmosphere on the field suddenly became stagnant, and a feeling of oppression arose. The people around were too afraid to even breathe and tried to reduce their sense of presence. The Mizukage was calm and composed, and didn't seem to mind the problem at all. With a smile on his face, after a while, a flash of lightning exploded, and in the blink of an eye it appeared in front of Fengyin. His burly and powerful body was very oppressive. He looked at the water shadow with a serious face, and anger was obvious in his eyes. The tense atmosphere made people feel that a fight would break out at any moment. Suddenly, an older voice sounded, as if trying to smooth things over. "What do you two mean by blocking us here? Since we are cooperating, let's not talk about the previous grudges anymore. If we really want to bring it up, we, the Iwagakure, should be the ones to bring it up." Unoki followed closely with a smile and said meaningfully, "During the Second Ninja World War, the Third Raikage fought against 10,000 enemies alone, causing heavy losses to the Iwagakure ninjas." Unoki brought this up implicitly at this time, clearly reminding the Raikage, if they really turn against each other, it will probably be a 2-on-1 situation. Even if he is the Raikage, he will not end up well. The Raikage naturally understood the deep meaning of these words. He snorted coldly, but restrained his momentum. Unoki looked at the Mizukage and nodded as a greeting. The water shadow glanced around, then suddenly frowned and asked in confusion, "Is the wind shadow not here yet?" The Tsuchikage shook his head and said in a worried look, "I'm afraid he won't come. You all know the current situation of the Sand Ninja." As soon as these words came out, the Raikage immediately laughed and said, "The 5 great ninja villages are being strangled by the throat like this. They are really useless." The Mizukage frowned, his expression somewhat unsightly. "So, the Sand Village has been eliminated, and from now on there will only be 3 of us. They have all experienced Konoha's fighting strength. It was already difficult, and now 4 people have become 3, which is like adding insult to injury." That Tsuchikage sighed and shook his head. "There is no other way. If it had been a few years ago, we could have intervened, but now." The words were not yet finished, but everyone knew that the Sand Ninja was the fat meat at Konoha's fingertips, within easy reach. The Mizukage said darkly, "If Konoha is given another 10 years, I'm afraid even we will become like the Sand Ninja." Ever since Konoha showed its dominance, the other villages all started to feel insecure and were terrified by the slightest disturbance. This may seem like an exaggeration, but the reality is far more serious than this. After all, no one dares to gamble or fight with the safety of the village. That Tsuchikage remained steady and soon calmed down. He said in a deep voice, "So, we must unite and resist the invasion of Konoha together." His words were agreed by other shadows. After all, they were all in the same boat, sharing life and death, honor and disgrace. Afterwards, the 3 shadows walked into the Hidden Mist Village. The reason why the meeting was held in the Hidden Mist Village was because it was far away from the mainland and was on the water, so it could be kept secret. Everyone came to a secret room, which was under surveillance in all directions, and no one could enter. After everyone sat down, the Raikage hurriedly said, "I got an important piece of news. Konoha's Research Institute has developed a new type of communication method that is said to ignore distance." As soon as he finished speaking, the Mizukage and the Tsuchikage stood up in horror. Their faces changed drastically, as if they were watching a horror movie. "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Mizukage shook his head and spoke immediately. The shock in the Tsuchikage's eyes remained unchanged, and everyone knew what this news meant. The means of communication in the ninja world generally require manpower or transmission by ninja hawks, but all of these take time, usually at least days. The Raikage smiled bitterly and said, "Nothing is impossible. I was also shocked when I found out about it, so I sent someone to investigate." After saying that, the Tsuchikage and Mizukage stared at him, silently praying that the news was false. But unfortunately, the cruel reality still came. "It's all true. They have already released the news." The Tsuchikage's eyes were dull, and he murmured, "Oh my sixth-path sage, is Konoha really so blessed? Why are all geniuses born in Konoha?" This news dealt them a heavy blow, cutting off their confidence in resisting Konoha. Economy, military, people's livelihood, and now there's another communication. Mizukage leaned back in his chair, muttering to himself every time he recited one of them. It was like a heavy hammer hitting his heart. shattering it into pieces. Chapter 188, Kazekage and Number 039, S Secret Meeting with the Hokage. A meeting that was supposed to be a joint discussion on how to deal with Konoha seemed so quiet at this moment. Konoha was like a giant beast, pressing down on everyone's hearts and surrounding them tightly. The blue sky was covered with haze, the sunlight was blocked and not a single ray of light could be seen at this moment. Fear is growing in the hearts of the shadows in each village, and is gradually destroying their will, but they themselves are unaware of it, or rather, subconsciously ignore this fear and dare not face it. As the host, the Mizukage was the first to speak, breaking the dead silence. Everyone, stop being suspicious of each other. With a powerful enemy ahead of us, we cannot afford to waste time on internal strife. If this statement had been made a few minutes ago, they would probably have sneered and thought it was a waste of time, but now, both the Raikage and the Itsukage said nothing and nodded silently in agreement. The Mizukage couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw this. If they were still suspicious at this point, then let alone fighting against Konoha, it would be good enough to be able to maintain this alliance. Fortunately, things did not reach the worst point. At least, there was still hope of resistance, well, just a slight possibility. So, the three actors discussed the matter of jointly opening up resources. It lasted for a whole day and night, and every issue is dealt with seriously without any hesitation. No one would joke, nor dare to joke, about the life and death of the village. Finally, the meeting came to an end and everyone present smiled with satisfaction, as if they had regained some of their confidence. This alliance represents that the three major ninja villages are no longer limited to superficial cooperation, but a deeper connection. Konoha is very strong. So strong that only their unity can give them the confidence to win. It's a pleasure working with you. Mizukage smiled with satisfaction, and all the haze in his heart seemed to be swept away and disappeared. The Raikage let out a deafening laugh, his skin flashing with lightning. Happy cooperation. The Itsukage nodded silently, smiled with relief and said, "It's a pleasure to work with you." After the three of them finished speaking, they smiled at each other, and everything was said without words. And at the moment when they reached a consensus, Konoha, far across the sea, was receiving a person that no one expected inside the Hokage building. The surroundings were now full of Anbu on alert, and all residents within 100 meters were cleared out. This is a situation that has never happened in Konoha's history, and all of this is done to ensure the confidentiality of the information, make sure there is no possibility of leakage of conversation inside. Even Konoha's top leaders were not allowed to enter. The clan leaders of each clan were well informed and all rushed over. The four major clans, the Senju, Uchiha, Hyuga, and Uzumaki, all arrived, made eye contact, and exchanged information. Narashikachi said nothing about this, but he was on high alert. Hatake Tsukumo even directly mobilized all the Anbu, and all the cage-level masters were deployed around the area. They can know nothing about any disturbance. Uzumaki Ashina's eyes flickered. Today's scene was indeed quite big and also quite sudden. No news has been released yet. Even the entire Anbu team has been dispatched. He turned to look at Beidao and asked in a low voice, "Does Chief Beidao know what happened?" Upon hearing this, Uchiha Kitajima looked up at the building under martial law not far away and shook his head slightly. "I don't know. The incident happened suddenly and even the villagers were evacuated temporarily." After he finished speaking, he paused and said in a heavier tone, "But something must have happened in this situation." Uzumaki Ashina's mouth twitched. "Do I need to tell you that, because of what happened today, even the nearby ninja school had to go on emergency holiday? You know, the Hokage has always attached great importance to education and is present at every opening and graduation ceremony, and now, they are actually giving students a holiday and letting them go home, which shows how important the matter is." Even as everyone was talking about this, the Hokage building seemed unusually calm at the moment. Zingai Feng looked at the person in front of him with interest and spoke with some surprise. "I didn't expect you to come to Konoha. According to common sense, you and I should never have any contact with each other again, instead of being here peacefully together and talking in detail face to face. Your Excellency the Third Kazekage." That's right, the person in front of him is none other than the supreme leader of the Sand Ninja, the Third Kazekage. Chiao's previous words had deeply touched his heart, and he felt vaguely shaken, but what made him decide to come to Konoha was the joint meeting of the other three ninja villages not long ago. The Kazekage was keenly aware of the unusual nature of this meeting, and the Sand Ninja was no longer able to participate if he wanted to minimize the losses in the future. He had to leave for Konoha immediately. Feng Ying looked around with a cautious look on his face. He didn't know that the moment he arrived, Zingai Feng had already ordered the area to be blocked. "Don't worry, Master Feng Ying. No third person knows about our conversation. The area outside is currently heavily blocked. so no spies from other villages will approach. Hoshino Feng naturally knew what he was worried about. Given the current situation, if he came to Konoha and his whereabouts were leaked, it would have a huge impact on the outside world. He immediately gave the assurance, allowing Feng Ying to feel at ease. Feng Ying relaxed a little after hearing that, calmed himself down, lowered his head to consider his words, and did not speak. Hoshino Feng smiled slightly, did not urge him, and waited patiently for Feng Ying to speak. After a cup of tea, Feng Ying seemed to have let go of some burden and looked at Xingai Feng with a frown. I came here in secret this time to make a deal with Konoha? Xingai Feng nodded. As expected, the content of this transaction was probably not simple. Seeing that Xingai Feng had a calm expression, Feng Ying then lowered his voice and said dejectedly, the Sand Ninjas promise that they will not resist when Konoha unifies the ninja world in the future, and the top leaders will continue to weaken the resistance of ordinary people in the village, and Konoha needs to ensure that they will not kill them all, and will do their best to protect and treat the Sans shinobi and ordinary villagers well. This commitment will only be verbal and there will be no written agreement. After saying this, Feng Ying seemed to have used up all his strength and his face turned pale. Xingai Feng narrowed his eyes and tapped the table with his hands from time to time. Thinking about the pros and cons and feasibility of the transaction, this part was actually beyond his expectations and completely exceeded his inner predictions. It can be said that Feng Ying's risky move made Xingai Feng quite hesitant. After all, if a consensus could be reached, a lot of effort would be saved. The long wait did not make Feng Ying feel dissatisfied. If Xingai Feng agreed immediately, he would probably become suspicious and think that there was a trap waiting for him. After a long time, Xingai Feng took a deep breath. After careful consideration, his deep and unfathomable eyes slowly opened, with a gleam in his eyes and the corners of his mouth raised. Your Excellency, Feng Ying is so generous. I really admire him. This is not a compliment, but the true words from Kid Hoshino's heart. The dignified Kazakage went to the enemy base alone and made a huge gamble in exchange for the future of the Sand Village. This kind of gesture made Xingai Feng change his impression of him greatly, and he rarely praised him. Chapter 189, Peeping into the Building. Is it fun? Hearing this, Feng Ying gave a bitter smile. If possible, who would bet the entire village like this? So, what is your choice, Hokage? The Kazakage looked at Hoshino Kaede nervously, and even his breathing subconsciously became lighter. It is human instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm. Surrounded by wolves, he can only choose Konoha, a village that looks harmless but is actually as ferocious as a tiger. Although the tiger is strong, he will not be in danger for the time being as long as he is fed. On the other hand, the other villages are full of hungry wolves. Showing their greedy green eyes, Xingai Feng stood up, stretched out his hand, and said gently, since Lord Feng Ying is sincere, what reason do I have to object? Hearing this, Feng Ying's heart settled down. This was a good start, but Xingai Feng added, however, I'm afraid the content of this agreement needs to be expanded. Feng Ying forced a smile and nodded with difficulty. This is natural. If the weak seek forgiveness from the strong, they will be slaughtered and bled. This is the cruel law of the world of carnivory. Xingai Feng's smile became even wider. Well, I have a few conditions. The two sides began a new round of heated debate on the content of the agreement treaty, with one side striving for the greatest benefit and the other side only making a formal defense. The content of their conversation is not known to outsiders. At the same time, people outside were talking about it. Yu Guanggai was standing at a lookout point with his accompanying disciples beside him. How boring. Who is the teacher talking to? He actually called for such a big fuss. I thought there was going to be a war. Leaning against a tree trunk, Moonlight Knight said idly. Bai Shiai looked at his teacher speechlessly and complained, I guess only you are so relaxed, teacher, and you dragged me over here. As he spoke, he opened his eyes wide with an angry expression. It's obvious that they are using me as a laborer. Hearing this, Moonlight Knight chuckled, spread out his hands, and smiled in a very provocative way. Hey, I'm training you. But then his smile faded, and his eyes suddenly became sharp. Today's scene has never happened before. It is definitely a big deal. Bai Shiai rolled his eyes at him and muttered, everyone knows that. Yu Guangyi's eyes twitched, and she flicked his forehead with her finger in annoyance, saying, look at how capable you are. Be careful. If something goes wrong, I can't protect you. Bai Shiai covered his slightly red forehead, muttered a few words, then concentrated his attention and looked around. Just a few hundred meters away from the building, several figures popped their heads out from time to time above the Hokage rock, using their hands like binoculars, hoping to see more clearly. Rizu, how is it? Can you see clearly? Yamanaka Inoichi said anxiously to Rezu, who was watching with his eyes rolled aside hearing the question. Rezu shook his head regretfully. I can't see clearly. The building is sealed to isolate perception. There are no loopholes at all. Narashikaku covered his forehead as if he had a headache. Come on, with this situation, there is no way there could be a loophole for you to exploit. Even if there is a loophole, if you really find out what's going on inside, we'll all be finished. Even my dad couldn't protect me. Before I left home, he told me not to cause any trouble, with such a big thing happening in Konoha. Shikaku knew without even thinking about it how tight the defense was, and all ways to find loopholes were blocked. It would be strange if there were any loopholes. Do you really think those adults are just here to do nothing? In addition to Zu, Lu, Dai and Rezu, there were 2 others who were dragged over to make up the numbers. Minato listened to the conversation between the few people and couldn't help but said with some concern, are they really okay like this? Kushina watched the fun and said, what does it matter? Those adults are so busy that they have no time to care about us. After saying that, she rolled her eyes and encouraged, Minato, aren't you curious? Upon hearing this, Minato shook his head like a rattle and even took a step back. No. I'm not curious. Kushina was a little bored when she heard this. You are just too rule-abiding. You don't even participate in such a fun thing. Minato's mouth twitched. Haha, funny? I didn't realize that. What are you doing? A loud shout came from behind the crowd. Everyone panicked instantly, thinking that an adult had come, and they were startled, but when she turned around, she was filled with dismay. Kushina's eyes were even spitting fire and her fists were clenched so hard that they made a clattering sound. Shengshu. You are itching for a beating, right? Seeing Kushina ready to make a move, Rope Tree hurriedly smiled apologetically, as if the iron fist of justice would fall on his head in the next second. Hey, I'm just joking to liven up the atmosphere. Kushina smiled cruelly when she heard that. Are you kidding? Haha, boom, boom, boom. Minato took a deep breath and subconsciously blocked his eyes, unable to bear to see the miserable state of Rope Tree after the beating. Kushina snorted, clapped her hands, and left, leaving behind. Rope Tree was in excruciating pain, squatting on the ground and digesting the pain silently except for Minato, who showed some concern. Everyone else's eyes were staring at the building opposite without moving, just as everyone was watching intently. A few people heard curious questions. Is this fun? Kushina nodded without hesitation and said affirmatively, of course. Yamanaka Hiachi, who was fascinated by the scene, also nodded. Nothing can be more exciting than this, but Hayashi was concentrating and didn't want to say a word. Narashikaku, who did not join in, had his eyes twitching and could not bear to watch it any longer, so he reminded him, you too. Turn around and see who's coming. At this time, the 3 of them realized that something was wrong and it was too quiet, so they quickly turned around to look. This sight made their bodies stiffen instantly, and they couldn't help but force a smile on their faces that was uglier than crying. Lord Guji, why are you here? Yamanaka Inoichi said with a slightly red face. I felt a little ashamed inside, as if I had been caught doing something bad by an adult. Maruboshi Kosuk chuckled and said playfully, of course I'm here to catch you. He's quite courageous, but also quite cautious. He knows he can't get close, so he still rolls his eyes. The preparations are quite adequate, but it's just that you underestimated others a little bit. His eyes briefly glanced at Rezu, and the words he spoke made him lower his head. Seeing the 3 people looking uneasy, Guji felt amused in his heart, but he put on a serious expression and said, if you really look into your behavior just now, you will not end up with good results, especially you, Hayashi. Guji looked at Rezu with a serious look, and his words became harsh. Konoha has a clear rule that the Byakugan cannot be used within the village unless necessary. Have you forgotten? In an instant, cold sweat broke out on Rezu's back and he felt a little flustered. He was so focused just now that he forgot this rule for a moment. If he is held accountable, he will definitely be severely punished, and even his family may be implicated. When he thought of this, his face turned ugly and he was filled with regret. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190. New Era, New Goal. The surface of the lake remained calm, but secretly there were turbulent waves. The 3 major ninja villages, except for the Sand Ninja, began a series of actions after their alliance, but these could not shake Konoha's growing trend. At most they just felt annoying. After Zingai Feng found out, he shook his head and laughed. saying only one sentence: "Let them dance for a while, otherwise they will get suffocated." In this atmosphere, another 2 years passed, and it had been 40 years since I came to Konoha 2 years ago. Hatake Tsukumo ended his single life and finally married his sweetheart, which put to rest a matter that had been worrying Kid Hoshino. In the same year, she became pregnant with a child, who is now over 1 year old. Not only that, Wang and Yumei also got together and got married half a year ago. Which is really cause for celebration. As for Hime and Gahu, they are not far from getting married, just one step away this year. Many of the older generation also retired, such as Uchiha Kitajima, who passed the position of clan leader to his son, Uchiha Fugaku. Due to poor health, Uchiha Fugaku, who was only 19 years old, had already opened the 3 Magatama Sharingan, and his strength was also half a step to the level of Kage in the tribe. His strength ranks among the top 5, which is why he was able to successfully take over the position of tribe leader. Similarly, the transfer of power began within the Hyuga clan, with Hyuga Hayashi taking over as clan leader, and the process went very smoothly. Not only that, Narashikachi, one of the 3 elders of Konoha, formally resigned. Hoshino Fen tried to keep him again, but due to his promise, he had no choice but to let him go home to recuperate. Since Shikaku's qualifications and achievements were not enough to be an elder, Hoshino Kaede considered it again and finally gave the position of elder to Hatake Tsukumo. His achievements and qualifications are beyond reproach. He is also very capable, and he is also the head of the Anbu. He is very suitable in all aspects. At first, Hatake Tsukumo was reluctant, as he felt that the power was too great, and he kept refusing, until Hoshino Kaede gave him an order with a stern face, and then he reluctantly accepted. The older generation of Konoha is gradually withdrawing from the stage of history, and the younger generation will take over the burden. This is an era of shining stars, a brand new era, and this era is destined to be extraordinary. On the first day of school, on the street, Obito was screaming the whole time, with a panic look on his face and muttering to himself, "It's over. It's over. School starts today. I'm going to be late." The 2 short legs moved very fast like Hot Wheels, bursting out at an unprecedented speed. But unfortunately, looking at the sparse flow of people at the gate, Obito lowered his head in disappointment. "For you." Just when Obito was deeply annoyed, a sweet and crisp voice sounded in his ears. Obito raised his head, and his feeling of loss was swept away and turned into joy. "Thank you, Lin." Looking at Obito, who was ecstatic holding the admission letter, Nahor Lin said helplessly, "Alice, you are late even on the first day of school." Hearing this, Obito smiled and said, "This is an accident. I got up early in the morning." But, before she finished speaking, Nahor Lin said the next sentence very skillfully, "You were late because you helped the old lady cross the street, right?" Obito nodded hurriedly. "Yes, yes, yes." Nahor Lin sighed and said, "Forget it. Tomorrow is the day when the Hokage will give a speech. Don't be late again." Obito's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said seriously, "I will definitely not be late. After all, I waited for 2 years for this day." Seeing that Obito was rarely serious, Nahor Lin was very pleased. It seemed that Obito was making progress. "Okay, see you tomorrow." Nahor Lin smiled sweetly and said goodbye. Obito nodded vigorously, showing 2 rows of white teeth, raised his thumb and said, "See you tomorrow." In the building not far away, Feng Xingai saw all of this. Obito and Nahor Lin, it seems like they have a special relationship. I just don't know if history will repeat itself. After thinking about it, Xingai Feng shook his head and said, "Forget it. Everyone has their own destiny. Why worry about it? Even if Obito wants to destroy the world, I can just slap him twice to make him wake up." Thinking of this, Xingai Feng's heart suddenly became clear and he no longer worried about these things. The next morning, the ninja school was bustling with activity as parents brought their children to school. Sarutobi Hirozen came over with his youngest son, still giving instructions. "Asuma, don't cause me any trouble." Asuma curled his lips and didn't give any face. "It depends on my mood." Veins popped up on Hirozen's forehead and his eyes twitched. If there weren't so many people around, he would have probably attacked him. "Isn't this Elder Sarutobi?" Suddenly, a loud voice was heard. Hirozen looked towards the source of the voice and saw Might Dai also coming with his child. "It's Dai?" Sarutobi Hirozen greeted with a smile. Because of Kid Hoshino, Might Dai's treatment is much better than in the anime. He was already an elite Jonin under normal circumstances many years ago. If one can open any of the 8 gates of ninjutsu, then he will be at the level of Kage. Such a strong person will be a guest of honor in any ninja village. Therefore, even Sarutobi Hirozen was polite. "You are also here to bring your child to school, right?" Hiruzen's eyes fell on the child with a bowl-cut haircut nearby. Might I nodded, then exchanged a few words with Hiruzen and went into the school. First Asuma, who was walking behind, looked at I curiously, thinking secretly, is this the best taijutsu master in Konoha? You look very ordinary, not like a strong person at all. It's no wonder he thinks this way. In fact, many people have the same first impression. Are you wondering why he's so ordinary? Sarutobi Hiruzen said to his youngest son. Asuma looked up at his father, hoping for an answer. Hiruzen chuckled and rubbed his little head. When you become a ninja, you will know how powerful he is. After saying that, without waiting for him to think for a moment, he pulled him into the school. An hour later, the first-year students gathered in the playground. On the track were teachers and parents from each class, talking and laughing. Nahara-rin kept looking around, but didn't see Obito, so she stamped her feet and said angrily, "Really? Didn't Obito say he wouldn't be late? There's only 5 minutes left." Another 4 minutes passed anxiously, and Zangief was already standing on the stage, ready to speak. Looking at the children below, he nodded with satisfaction, then coughed lightly and was about to start. Suddenly, a childish voice sounded in this quiet moment, interrupting Zangief's speech. "Wait a minute, wait a minute." Zangief looked in the direction of the voice and couldn't help but shook his head and smiled. This kid is really good at finding the right time. Many eyes were focused on him, making the little guy a little nervous. The representatives sent by Uchiha to watch the ceremony had extremely gloomy expressions. This moment was simply a disgrace to Uchiha. Not only that, even ordinary parents were whispering and frowning from time to time, thinking that this was too rude. Chapter 191, Moving Building, thinking of giving way. Whose child is this? He is so rude that he is even late for school. SHH, keep your voice down. Didn't you see the clan emblem on his clothes? He's from the Uchiha clan. Aren't Uchiha always punctual? How come you're late? I don't know about that. I know that kid. I heard that he was late yesterday too. Even his admission notice was picked up by someone else. Wow, that's amazing. You even dare to interrupt the Hokage's speech? On the playground, a few words came out of the crowd, and they looked at Obito with dissatisfaction. The Uchiha were also implicated, and although he didn't dare to say it directly, his dissatisfaction was obvious on his face. Some of the brave ones glared at the representatives sent by Uchiha, as if they were about to have a fight. The Uchiha did not dare to lose his temper in public, so he could only blame Obito. Nahara-rin looked at the uneasy Obito, feeling very worried. She bit her teeth lightly and prepared to go forward and pull him into the team. Just as he took a step, he was stopped by their homeroom teacher, Hinata Kazumi, who shook her head slightly at him, signaling him to stay put. Out of trust in her teacher, Nahara-rin suppressed her inner anxiety and looked at Obito nervously. Just as the atmosphere became settled and everyone was talking about it, Kid Hoshino walked down the platform and walked towards Obito. This action obviously made everyone confused and puzzled. "Little Obito, do you still recognize me?" Hoshino Kaede walked up to him, squatted down, raised his hand to stroke Obito, and smiled gently. Obito blushed slightly and nodded gently. He had asked around in the past 2 years, and only then did he know that the person who came to their house was actually the Hokage. "I know you, you are Hokage," Obito said without any stage fright, and then added, "You lied to me and said you had heat stroke." When the past was mentioned, Zangief's face flashed with embarrassment. "You still remember it? Then do you remember what I said to you at the beginning?" When Obito heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. His big watery eyes were pure and clear, and he nodded vigorously. "Remember, I finally see you again." The people present were all quite powerful and could hear the conversation between the two. Those who knew looked calm, while those who didn't know looked confused. "It seems like you two know each other, but it seems you're late again," Hoshino said jokingly. Obito smiled and scratched his head, then said a little awkwardly, I just went to help the old lady." As he spoke, his voice became lower and lower. He could say this in front of others, but in front of the Hokage and Hoshino Kaede, he could not muster up the energy. Hoshino Kaede smiled happily. He stood up, grabbed Obito's little hand, and personally brought him to the front. He patted his head and said, "That reason is correct, but next time before you do something good, take care of yourself first." Obito nodded as if he understood, trying hard to digest what Kid Hoshino said to him. Seeing Obito's troubled face, Hoshino Kaede didn't say anything else, but went on stage and started speaking. Hinata Kazumi looked at Obito thoughtfully, thinking, Hokage-sama seems to pay a lot of attention to this child, which is rare. After being together for so long, she rarely saw Zangief pay so much attention to a child. Judging from the conversation between the two, it seems that they have known each other for a long time. And he even promised something to Obito. It seems that this is not a simple thing. After a small episode, the opening speech went smoothly. Then, Kid Hoshino winked at Obito with an encouraging look, and hurried away to deal with other matters. After receiving the encouraging look, Obito grinned widely and stood there grinning foolishly, making people wonder if he was stupid. It wasn't until Nahora-rin patted him that he came back to his senses. What's wrong? Lin. Nahora-rin was excited and somewhat incoherent. Obito, you know the Hokage. Hearing this, Obito grinned and told the whole story of how he met the Hokage. Nahora-rin's eyes sparkled, and she said enviously, "You are so lucky." At this time, Hinata Kazumi came over, and the two little guys immediately straightened their backs and became serious. She was not as lively and cute as before at all, and Kazumi couldn't stop giggling when she saw it. "Are you so afraid of me?" They both shook their heads at the same time, their hands waving in disbelief. "No, absolutely not." Kazumi stared at the two of them for a while before saying, "Hurry back to class. Class will start soon." Obito and Nahora-rin looked at each other, then trotted back to the classroom. Seeing this, Hime chuckled and whispered, "Childhood sweethearts." Then she shook her head and walked back to the classroom. In the building next to the school, Zingai Feng raised his eyebrows, and the word trouble was written all over his face. Snapped. Hoshino Kaede casually threw a pile of documents onto the table, rubbed his eyebrows, closed his eyes and said to Marashi Kasuke, "So, with the current rate of expansion in Konoha, the current Hokage building needs to be relocated." When Maruboshi Kasuke saw this, he knew what Hoshino Kaede meant, but based on the current speed of expansion, he still spoke, "We have no choice but to do this. Konoha is several times larger than when it was first built, and the population has increased dozens of times. The current Hokage building is too remote." Having said this, Guji stopped talking without finishing. Zingai Feng leaned back and said helplessly, "Well, developing too fast is not a good thing either." Hearing this, Guji smiled and said, "But in the eyes of the villagers, this is a good thing." Zingai Feng rolled his eyes at him and said, "I'm afraid you've had complaints about this building for a long time. Now that the reason has been delivered to your door, you can't wait to tear it down." Having his secret thoughts exposed, Guji shrugged and said shamelessly, "I have never thought of it that way." Zingai Feng's mouth twitched, and he said unhappily, "Stop talking nonsense, make a plan quickly, and move quickly. Also, some areas need to be rezoned. Please keep an eye on this and make sure nothing gets messed up." Maruboshi Kasuke readily agreed, then picked up the documents and walked away humming a song without even a second thought. Zingai Feng smiled helplessly, but didn't take it to heart. To be honest, this building hasn't been renovated for a long time. Now is a good time to tear it down and rebuild it. Konoha is not short of money anyway. In the middle of the night, after finishing the last document, Zingai Feng got up, stretched, and left work. One thing that he had been thinking about and preparing for a long time on the road was the selection of the next Hokage. I had originally thought of waiting until the water gate was bigger, but now it seems that this is no longer suitable and there is not enough time. The village of Cloud, village of Mizugakure and village of Iwagakure have joined forces. These three families will never sit idly by and wait for death. They cannot wait another 10 years. I estimate that there will be major moves in the next 2 to 3 years. Tisk, is it too late? Hoshino Kaede thought. Then he chuckled and said, "I have done what I need to do. It's up to the next Hokage from now on." Chapter 192, The candidate is decided, the fourth Hokage is coming. The next day, the sky was slightly bright and the sun had just risen, and everything was normal due to the relocation of the Hokage building. Hoshino Kaede had to work from home. She handled the chores skillfully and then took out a piece of paper from the drawer. He propped his head on his hands and looked out the window, tapping the table with his fingers as if he was thinking about something important. After a long time, Zingai Feng picked up the pen and wrote a few names on the paper: Hatake Sakumo, Narashikechi Sarutobi, Hirozen. When writing the last name, Hoshino Kaede hesitated for a moment, but finally finished writing it. There is no doubt about Hatake Sakumo, a man with both strength and qualifications, with outstanding military achievements and having led the Second Ninja World War. It is a foregone conclusion that he will be a candidate for Hokage. Narashikechi, the former elder of Konoha, made important contributions to the construction and development of Konoha. He often offered advice, had a sharp mind and a calm personality, and was a trustworthy person. As for Sarutobi Hirozen, he had served as the third Hokage of Konoha, so he could be considered an old man, with even more seniority than the previous two. His achievements are beyond reproach, and even if he made mistakes before, his merits outweigh his faults. He has a gentle personality, but he is easily shaken. Thinking about this, Zingai Feng sighed slightly and finally put a question mark on his name. Anyone in Konoha can be swayed, but not the Hokage. Wavering is a taboo. If a major decision is encountered, it will bring about a devastating disaster, but as the saying goes, flaws do not outweigh merits, and no one is perfect. As for Danzo Shimura, who is not on Kid Hoshino's inner list, haha, he is even more unstable than Hirozen Sarutobi. If Hirozen tends to be gentle and soft-hearted, then Danzo is extremely radical and believes that force is everything. Just because of this, he has lost his competitiveness because his strength is not enough to suppress those below him. Hatake Tsukumo is at the peak of the Kage level, and is just one step away from becoming a super Kage. The sword he used during World War II made him realize something, and his strength has improved rapidly in the past few years. Since Narashikachi is a military strategist, he does not have to make too many demands on military force. Sarutobi Hirozen is also at the peak of the Kage level. In comparison, Danzo's strength is a bit lacking. He is only at the middle level of the Kage level. This strength may be acceptable in other ninja villages, but not in today's Konoha. There are two above him, so he is excluded directly. Zingai Feng leaned back in his chair, his mind wandering. No one knew what he was thinking about, and a hint of sadness appeared on his face. There are only two candidates in Konoha now. Who should we choose? There were 3 names written on the note, but Hoshino Feng knew that Liu Yu would definitely not do it. You finally retire and have a wife and kids at home. It's like living a godly life. Why would you become a Hokage? Therefore, there are only 2 candidates, but these 2 people made him very conflicted. In terms of relationship, he naturally tended to favor Tsukumo. After all, he watched them grow up, but it is precisely because of this understanding that he is troubled. Tsukumo's understanding of politics is only superficial, and he has no idea about anything deeper. If he were to become Hokage, he would probably need a long period of adaptation, but Hirozen was different. He had served 3 Hokage and was influenced by the 2nd generation during his reign. He has not been idle these years. Although he has made some minor mistakes, they are not enough to be condemned. His methods and abilities are not bad. The 2 of them each had their own strengths and weaknesses, which made Zingai Feng unable to make a decision for a moment, and a look of worry appeared on his face. What should I do? This really stumps me. Zingai Feng was at a loss whether to laugh or cry. It is strange that such a situation has never happened after so many years in power. After thinking for a while, he turned around and shouted to the door, "Hi!" Upon hearing this, Hayashi, who had been waiting outside the door, immediately pushed the door open. After Kosuke became the Minister of Civil Affairs, Hisashi was actually the only one left in the guard. Hoshino Kaede looked at him and smiled warmly. "Go call Tsukumo and Hirozen, and hurry up. I have something important to tell you." At the end, he deliberately emphasized the last sentence. Hayashi's heart tightened, and then he ran out without stopping to deliver the message. On the way, cold sweat oozed from Hayashi's forehead, and he kept saying, "It's terrible, it's terrible. Something bad is going to happen." Just now he inadvertently glanced at the table and saw only a piece of paper with only 2 names on it. Combined with the tone of Zingai Feng's voice, a bold guess suddenly arose in his heart. Not daring to think too much, Risha instantly accelerated, turned over and jumped onto the roof without stopping for a moment. At this moment, no one knew that a major change was about to happen in Konoha. A quarter of an hour later, Hisashi returned, sweating, his chest heaving, and said, "Hokage-sama, I have been notified." Zingai Feng nodded with satisfaction. "You've worked hard, go and have a rest." Hayashi immediately understood and ran away. He was not allowed to hear what happened next. After a while, the 2 arrived together. When they saw each other, they both had puzzled expressions and didn't know what they were looking for. They exchanged glances for a few moments before entering the house. Before they could even warm up their seats, they heard Hoshino Kaede say to them in a shocking tone, "I plan to give up my position. The next Hokage will be chosen from among the 2 of you." These words immediately froze the 2 people's tea-drinking movements. After their brains froze for a few seconds, the hands holding the teacups kept shaking as they put them back in place. Sarutobi Hirozen calmed himself down, coughed a few times, and said, "Hokage, please stop joking. Now is not a good time to give up the throne." After saying that, Hatake Tsukumo continued. His meaning was similar to Hirozen's, and his words were brief. "Konoha cannot do without you. Please take back what you just said." Hoshino Kaede glanced at the 2 of them and sighed. "It has been 27 years since Konoha was founded, and 13 years since I became Hokage. 13 years is long enough. We should at least make way for the younger generation." He paused, looked at Tsukumo and smiled. "If I don't let you, no one from the future can become Hokage." Hatake Tsukumo remained silent. He had some guesses about the special nature of Hoshino Kaede, but he didn't say it out loud. No, you have concerns, but I'm not dead. I'm just passing on the Hokage legacy. Hoshino Kaede continued speaking, looking back and forth between the two of them. So, it won't hurt if I step down. As for the current situation of Konoha, I know your abilities, and I can trust anyone who you are, so, don't try to persuade me anymore. I have made up my mind anyway. Having said that, the two of them didn't know what to say. Zingai Feng smiled and said, I called you here today to decide who will be the Hokage. As soon as these words were spoken, the room suddenly fell silent, and no one spoke first. Seeing this, Zingai Feng knocked on the table in dissatisfaction and said, Don't play dumb. Since I called you here, the purpose is for this matter. You must give me an answer today. It doesn't matter which of you two is in charge. I'm leaving my words here. You can discuss it among yourselves. After saying that, Zingai Feng strode away, leaving the place, leaving the two of them looking at each other in bewilderment for a moment. No one could bring themselves to speak. Chapter 193. The position of Hokage is determined, and the family must be together. After giving the choice to the two, Zingai Feng left without looking back. I have cleared the way for you. The rest is up to you. Zingai Feng looked at Kanayang and grinned. He seemed to see his former self in the sea of clouds. Teacher, I have brought up Konoha by hand, and it is time to let go. I have fulfilled most of the promises I made. I will leave the rest to the younger generations to explore. He shook his head and walked forward with a smile on his face. His steps were slow but very steady. After walking around Konoha, Feng Hoshino slowly stopped and looked at the two people in the house with a gentle expression. He was in a daze for a while, then stepped, and it was dinner time, and in the living room, the 16-year-old Hoshino Teru looked a little more mature and less childish, but in front of his parents, he is still a child. The three of them placed 4 sets of bowls and chopsticks on the dining table. It has been like this since Zingai Feng moved out and has never been missed. Sakura Kinomoto looked at the empty bowls and chopsticks with a hint of nostalgia in her eyes, but she quickly came to her senses and sighed. Zio Feng hasn't been back for a long time. As soon as these words were spoken, the originally warm scene was suddenly broken, and Hoshino Teru's joyful expression suddenly darkened. He is the Hokage. Hoshino Yoda shook his head, not knowing what to say. Upon hearing this, Sakura Kinomoto was suddenly speechless and swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Jingle bell. The wind chimes hanging on the door suddenly rang. An ethereal and crisp sound was heard, and a figure who had not returned for a long time appeared at the door with a snap. The chopsticks in Sakura Kinomoto's hand fell to the ground. She covered her mouth and wiped her eyes in disbelief. Everything in front of me is real, Mom. I'm back. Zingai Feng smiled like a spring breeze, warming his chest. Sakura Kinomoto's eyes suddenly filled with tears, and she rushed straight towards Kaede Hoshino, 2 lines of tears sliding down her cheeks, and she kept talking. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. Zingai Feng opened his hands helplessly, a little at a loss. He turned his head to look at the two people who were still in a daze and asked, What's happening here? Zingai Wei shook his head vigorously, and then said excitedly, Brother, why are you back? Zingai Feng raised his eyebrows. You mean, I can't come back? As soon as he finished speaking, 2 fierce gazes immediately fell on Hoshino Teru. Zingai Wei waved his hands and explained hurriedly, I mean, you never come back for dinner. After saying this, the heavy pressure receded like the tide, allowing Hoshino Teru to breathe a sigh of relief. Hoshino Kaede gave Kinomoto Sakura a reassuring look, then sat down in his seat and spoke lightly. I've resigned from the position of Hokage. I'll probably eat here more often from now on. Hoshino Teru exclaimed, his face almost sticking to Hoshino Kaede. No way, brother, you really don't want to be Hokage anymore. At this time, Kinomoto Sakura came back to her senses and said nervously and worriedly, Is this really okay? Everyone knew how popular his eldest son was in Konoha. Almost all policies of Konoha were formulated by him, and his prestige was at its peak. It is no exaggeration to say that even if the first-generation Hokage were to be resurrected at this moment, he would not be as famous as Hoshino Kaede once this news spreads. It is estimated that it will cause a major earthquake, shaking Konoha and the ninja world. Faced with their surprise and worry, Zingai Feng remained calm, picked up his chopsticks and talked while eating. It's okay. In fact, there were already signs of giving up my position a few years ago, and everyone else knew about it. This time we are just deciding on the candidate, and there is still some time before we give up the position. Hoshino Yoda pretended to be calm while picking food for him, but asked with a gossipy look on his face, Who will be the next Hokage? Zingai Feng's hand that was picking up the food paused slightly, and he turned his head to look at him, with a speechless look in his eyes. Do you think I'll tell it? Hoshino Yoda laughed twice. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Zingai Feng shook his head, lowered his head to eat, and didn't say anything else. At the same time, the candidate for Hokage was finally announced. Time goes back to the moment when Zingai Feng just went out. Sarutobi Hiruzen was extremely conflicted, as if there were two little people fighting each other. On one hand, he is asked to compete for the position of Hokage, while on the other hand, he is advised to give up and enjoy his retirement. This is the position of Hokage, the highest symbol of power in Konoha. Not only that, after Kid Hoshino's operations, basically the entire Fire Nation must obey the orders of the Hokage. The daimyo prefecture is in name only, and almost everyone can see that the growth of Konoha village is inevitable. It can be said that the land of fire is now controlled by Konoha except for the lack of a name. It has everything it should have. Who wouldn't be tempted by such temptation? Sarutobi Hiruzen's breathing gradually became heavier, and he almost wanted to speak first, but he held back several times. The biggest difference between Hiruzen and Danzo is that he always thinks twice before doing anything. Although the temptation was great, he held back because he was hesitant in his heart. Could he lead Konoha to the throne? The situation is very good right now and Konoha has a solid foundation. If there is any mistake at this critical juncture, it will be a sinner for all eternity. He hesitated and hesitated. Fear gradually occupied his heart. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and his eyes inadvertently glanced at Hatake Tsukumo, who was also in deep thought. It was surprising to find that his eyes changed from nervous, to conflicted, and finally to determined. In an instant, a sharpness spread throughout his body like a newly formed sword. The sword energy rises into the sky, revealing its sharp edge. Seeing this, Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed with a complicated expression and shook his head. I'm old. Old? After he finished speaking, he bent his body and walked out with an indescribable sense of old age. Elder Sarutobi. After walking a few steps, Tsukumo's voice came from behind. Sarutobi Hiruzen paused but did not look back. Hatake Tsukumo stood up, his voice firm and sharp, but it was well hidden. Thank you. Just one sentence, 2 words, that's all Shumeo said. Sarutobi Hiruzen did not reply, but just smiled bitterly and shook his head, his steps a little unsteady, as if he had aged a few years. In an instant Hatake Tsukumo looked at this senior who had served 3 generations of Hokage, with respect in his eyes until the hunched figure disappeared. He exhaled, raised his head and looked at the ceiling, muttering to himself, the responsibility of Hokage is entrusted to me, and I will not let you down. As the words fell, his face turned determined and he clenched his fists tightly. After staying alone for a while, the sky gradually darkened. Hatake Tsukumo walked out of the door and immediately saw his son and wife. His expression suddenly became gentle, and the sword, which had always been sharp, now had a scabbard to restrain it. Why are you here? It's so late. You should take the children to rest. The woman smiled pitifully and said, I'm here to take you home. A family should be together. Chapter 194, Announcement of the 4th Hokage. The next morning, Zingai Feng summoned all the senior executives. The heads of all departments were present, as well as the patriarchs of all the ninja clans in Konoha. Looking at the people with different expressions, Zingai Feng chuckled and said, you all are well informed. You got the news so quickly. The people below had different expressions, all said nothing, and lowered their heads slightly. The air pressure at the scene seemed to drop. Seeing this, Zingai Feng chuckled and said, it seems that everyone has different opinions. Lu Yi, you speak up. The deer that was named raised its head with a serious expression, completely different from its usual calmness, and there seemed to be endless words in its eyes. Even Lu Yi, who had retired and went home, was invited back to this meeting, which shows the importance of the meeting. He first looked around, then frowned and said, Hokage-sama, given the current situation, are you a little anxious? After hearing this, everyone nodded in unison, and it was obvious that they thought the same thing in their hearts. It's not easy to find a Hokage with vision and ability. They are not blind. Now that living standards are rising, everyone can see how brilliant Zingai Feng's policies are. Seeing the people below share the same expression, Zingai Feng slowly shook his head and said kindly, of course I know all this. Everyone pricked up their ears, hoping to get a reasonable explanation, but Konoha can't just rely on me alone. The younger generation also needs a stage. You know, more than half of the people standing here are young people. After so many years, many elderly people have given up their positions and handed over the management of their families to their younger generations. Looking around, most of the people standing in the office today are young people. Hoshino Kaede showed a gratified smile. I feel very happy to see them. I am glad that Konoha can have such outstanding young people. The future will definitely belong to the young. If that's the case, why should I occupy the position of Hokage? The words were deep and sincere, touching and deeply rooted in people's hearts. Everyone present is smart, and those who can stand here are already the backbone of Konoha. Naturally, you can distinguish the truth from the false in the words, Hokage-sama is determined to retire. This sentence emerged in everyone's mind. Seeing Hoshino Kaede's gentle yet decisive attitude, Luya sighed. Okay, then who will be the next Hokage? The Hokage was only decided yesterday, so even if they were well informed, it was impossible for them to know the specific candidate. After hearing this, the others all looked forward to it and looked at Zingai Feng curiously according to their intelligence. The current candidates for Hokage are just those few. Zingai Feng didn't keep the secret and said, I have 3 candidates in mind, and Luya is one of them, but I don't think he will agree, so I crossed him out. His eyes focused on Nara Shikaichi, who nodded neither servilely nor arrogantly, and said calmly, I've retired, so don't bother me anymore. These words have already made the stance clear, and some people can't help but feel a little regretful. After all, Shikaichi is qualified to compete for the position of Hokage. The remaining 2 are Hatake Tsukumo and Sarutobi Hiruzen. As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of the people present changed. With more surprise than confusion, they were not surprised that Hatake Tsukumo was chosen, as his strength and prestige were there, but Sarutobi Hiruzen was a bit unexpected. This second-generation disciple was actually on the list of candidates. It is said that a new emperor appoints his own ministers. The fact that 3 generations in power would nominate people from the second generation really makes people think a lot, but more of it is admiration, as there are almost no people who dare to do so. Seeing the different expressions below, Zingai Feng's smile became even more intense. Who do you think can be the 4th Hokage? There was complete silence in the field, and everyone seemed to be thinking deeply. Uzumaki Ashina narrowed his eyes but did not move. He was probably the only one present who was as steady as a rock, because the 9 Tails is sealed in Kushina, and Kushina is a member of the Uzumaki clan. No matter who becomes the 4th Hokage, it is impossible for him to make things difficult for the Uzumaki clan. After a stick of incense, Zingai Feng signaled Luya with his eyes. Luya's mouth twitched and he cursed inwardly, but on the surface he pretended to be profound and spoke first. I support Hatake Tsukumo. The words of this person carried a great weight. As soon as he opened his mouth, some families, especially the Yamanaka and Akimachi families, gave their full support. Yamanaka, Inoichi and Akimachi Choza exchanged glances and smiled. The 3 tribes of Pig, Deer and Butterfly share the same hatred for the enemy. Now that Uncle Luya has spoken, they, as the younger generations, naturally have to follow the words of the former elder of the Nara family. Seemed to be a signal, and the 4 major families all felt moved almost at the same time. They said, I support Hatake Tsukumo. In an instant, 80% of the senior executives sided with Hatake Tsukumo, while the rest were still struggling. However, these people were harmless. Hoshino Kaede stood up and said loudly, it seems that the 4th Hokage is the popular choice. Then, he paused, looked out the door with a smile on his face, and said, Shuamio, come in. Almost instantly, Hatake Tsukumo walked in with a calm expression. At this moment, everyone understood that the 4th Hokage had already made the decision, and what he did just now was just for show. Everyone, long time no see. Hatake Tsukumo greeted everyone with a smile. Having been in charge of the Anbu for many years, he exudes an aura of majesty without even getting angry, and a hint of murderous intent inadvertently spreads in all directions. The faces of some people who were not determined suddenly turned pale, and their bodies swayed, as if they were about to fall to the ground. Zingai Feng shook his head, stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. Suddenly the fierce aura dissipated, and Zingai Feng looked at everyone. The 4th Hokage has been chosen, and the succession ceremony will be held in January. I hope you will help me. Everyone did not dare to neglect it and shouted, we will definitely help with all our strength. Hoshino Kaede nodded, smiled at Tsukumo, then walked out of the building and left a message. Konoha is now presided over by the 4th Hokage. Please do not disturb unless necessary. Nara dear, who knew his temper well, could not help but hold his forehead in frustration after hearing this. The way he handled his job as a shopkeeper was really smooth and fluent. He must have practiced it countless times in his mind. Luya complained in his heart, then looked at Hatake Tsukumo and said, Master Hatake, please take a seat. Hatake Tsukumo came back to his senses, nodded, sat on the highest power chair in Konoha, took a deep breath, and then began to get into the role and discuss with everyone. After unloading the burden, Zingai Feng suddenly felt empty in his heart, as if a corner of his heart was missing. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. This guy is really a little uncomfortable when he's idle, but he was only lost for a moment. Then he gathered himself, stretched himself, and said with nostalgia in his eyes, once this matter is settled, other matters can be put on the agenda. Teacher, we will see each other again soon. Chapter 195 Humanity and Sophistication. The setting sun shines on the earth, and the first ray of morning light slowly rises just after the selection of the fourth Hokage was finalized. Konoha became lively in the Kimu tribe's territory. There was a constant flow of people, each carrying gifts and speaking words of congratulation. Hatake Tsukumo was wearing home clothes and sitting in the house, watching people coming and going, shaking his head helplessly. There will be no peace in the future, MRS. Hatake sat opposite him, smiled gently and poured him tea. This is inevitable and human nature. It is said that this was also the case when the second generation came to power. Hatake Tsukumo looked resolute, and said in a dignified manner, but I know that when the third generation came to power, all the gifts were given to the poor, and none were kept. Kakashi, who was just over 1 year old, said in a baby voice, should father do the same? Hatake Tsukumo gently touched his little head and said with a wry smile, this is difficult for me. I don't have the ability or the face to do so, MRS. Hatake was a little worried when she heard this, but if you accept it, what about the third generation? I'm not worried about that. A smile appeared on Hatake Tsukumo's lips, and his face was confident. After thinking for a while, he said, forget it. Since we can't hide it, let's keep it. If we don't, some families will be worried. Among these gifts, some were sent by good friends. They have no other meaning but just congratulations. Some were ordinary gifts, such as those from the Uchiha and Hyuga clans, expressing their goodwill to him. The last one is to test the waters under the guise of giving gifts, hoping to get some information. After all, a new official has 3 things to do when he takes office, so he will naturally be in a state of panic all day long if he has something to hide. As Konoha's interests grow, some people will inevitably have evil intentions. I've seen this side of things a lot when I was with Hokage-sama. It's the same old story. If it weren't for the fact that they were still somewhat useful, we would have wiped them out long ago. As the head of the Anbu, Hatake Tsukumo is well aware of the inside information, not to mention that he has been following the Hokage. Dark things are more visible in the dark, and some small movements can be seen clearly. After saying this, Hatake Tsukumo started teasing his son and ignored what was happening outside. While the Hatake residence was bustling with activity, the outside world was buzzing with discussions and news was flying everywhere. Shiraishi and the other 2 were walking on the street, and all they heard was the news about the fourth Hokage. Without a moment's rest, I didn't expect it to be Tsukumo-senpai, Bai Shiayu said, touching his chin. Rezu asked curiously, who did you favor before? Bai Shiayu scratched his head, no, I'm just surprised, but it seems very reasonable. Shenyu glanced at the 2 of them and said calmly, I think this is normal. The 2 of them immediately looked at him and said in unison, what do you mean? What do you think? Shenyu's mouth twitched slightly, and he looked at them with helpless eyes and said, this should be obvious. My brother is now 40 years old. If he wants to give up his throne, it will be to someone younger than him, and in Konoha, the only one who fits the bill is Hatake-senpai. Bai Shiayu nodded when he heard this, but then asked, but I heard from the teacher that there were originally 2 candidates for the position of Hokage. Although Elder Sarutobi is older, he is older than Senior Hatake in terms of seniority. Moreover, he once ruled Konoha together with Elder Danzo after the second generation passed away. I am quite experienced in this area. It is said that no one was present when the candidate for Hokage was announced. Yu Guanggai naturally attended that meeting, and Bai Shiayu naturally knew the internal details. What puzzled him was why Elder Sarutobi never showed up from beginning to end. Shenyu heard this and shook his head and said, I don't know about that. No one knows what happened that day. Bai Shiayu touched his chin and turned to look at Rezu with a meaningful look. Rezu's mouth twitched. Why are you looking at me? I don't know. After saying that, he added, Hayashi doesn't know either. He told me. Seeing that no one knew about it, Bai Shiayu felt bored and disappointed. Hey, what are you talking about? Just at this moment, several people walked towards them from the opposite side, and one of them said in surprise. Bai Shiayu raised his eyebrows. Rope tree? What a coincidence. What are you doing? Sheng Shu slapped his head and said casually, oh, I'm going to see my father. The 3 of them suddenly realized and looked at the optimistic rope tree, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. They all knew something about the Senju Kasaipa affair. Although he was spared the death penalty for assassinating the Hokage, He had to spend the rest of his life in prison. People went in and it had nothing to do with the children, but the rope tree was affected to some extent. After all, he is his son, and there will always be rumors. Thinking of this, Bai Shiao immediately changed the subject and asked curiously, "It is said that the day before the announcement of the fourth Hokage, the Hokage-sama had a long conversation with the two adults. Do you know the inside story?" Minato shook his head. This kind of thing was not something he could get involved in. Shangshu looked around, excluded outsiders, and whispered, "I do know some inside information." As soon as these words were spoken, they immediately aroused everyone's curiosity. Kushina looked at him with curiosity. "Tell me now." Norki coughed lightly and said, "Rumors are just rumors. I heard that the Hokage-sama was optimistic about the two and let them decide for themselves. As a result, Hatake-sama became the Hokage." After hearing this, everyone looked at each other, staring at him with wide eyes, as if to say, "That's it." Bai Shiao said speechlessly, "I thought something interesting happened, but nothing happened." Kushina nodded, not wanting to make a fuss. "That's right, the birth of the fourth Hokage is so bizarre, it feels a bit tasty." Shangshu agreed, "It's indeed a bit tasty. Shouldn't they quarrel for several days and nights?" Shen Yu helplessly held his forehead, looked at the onlookers speechlessly, and said, "Do you think it's possible? My brother has the final say in Konoha?" Who would question what he said? That makes sense, and it seems to have been the case in recent years. Clap clap. There was a sudden burst of applause from the surroundings. Everyone was startled and looked in the direction of the sound. They all bared their heads like quails. "You little guys are quite good at eating melons. Your sources of information are quite extensive. I'm afraid half of Konoha's top leaders are related to you." Hoshino Feng stood on the roof with someone else, clapping his hands and exclaiming. When Bai Shiao heard this, his eyes rolled and he smiled flatteringly. "Master, isn't it you who is the most important person in Konoha?" Zingai Feng nodded slightly and said with a smile, "It seems to be true." After saying that, he jumped off the roof, came in front of them, and gave each of them a slap on the face. Boom, boom, boom. "Grandmaster, please be gentle." Bai Shiao looked at him aggrievedly. Zingai Feng curled his lips and said, "I'll teach you a lesson. Don't be curious about everything." As he spoke, he pointed somewhere and motioned for everyone to look. Everyone looked in the direction of his gaze, and suddenly a chill ran down their spines. They all thought of the same word, "It's over." The Anbu appeared in front of everyone. If it weren't for Hoshino Kaede, they probably wouldn't have known about it. Chapter 196. It's okay. See him again? Bai Shiao paused and spoke with a slight raise in his voice. "Anbu. When did this happen?" Zingai Feng smiled and said, "Of course they are always there. At this critical moment, there are Anbu stationed everywhere. It is to prevent some people with ulterior motives." He looked at everyone meaningfully. "Little guys, Konoha is very sensitive at this time. Be careful of what you say." This was undoubtedly a reminder, and they were not fools, so they nodded repeatedly. The person standing next to Zingai Feng sneered and said disdainfully, "So many twists and turns. You learned bad things from that little guy Tobirama." Hearing this, Zingai Feng sometimes nodded and sometimes shook his head, saying, "This is to prevent trouble before it happens. It's always right to be careful. These are all fallacies." The man snorted coldly, and from his tone one could tell that he disagreed. Hoshino Feng just shook his head and smiled. Without saying anything, everyone looked at each other, and then Bai Shiao asked nervously, "Master, who is this senior? How come we haven't seen each other before?" After hearing this, Zingai Feng glanced at him sideways, as if he had thought of something interesting, and his tone of voice couldn't help but rise, which was very tempting. "He is a powerful man who is famous in the ninja world. You are an old senior. Remember to be polite." Zingai Feng made a few faces and made them confused, but since he was a senior, they all saluted spontaneously afterwards. Kushina couldn't hold back her curiosity and kept asking, "Hokage-sama, since he is so famous, what is his title?" Zingai Feng curled his lips, looked at the man with a serious face but a caring expression, and said, "Ninja World Shuro, that is his title." As soon as these 4 words came out of my mouth, the temperature dropped a few degrees. This title made everyone shudder, and a chill emerged in their hearts. Shangshu just felt that this title was so familiar, as if he had heard it before. After hearing these 4 words, Minato, who always had excellent grades, suddenly had a figure in his mind. His head turned like a machine to look at the person next to Hoshino Kaede, and the figure gradually overlapped with the one in the book, flawless, without any sense of incongruity. Instantly, Minato blurted out, "Uchiha Madara. One of the founders of Konoha?" Clap clap clap. Zingai Feng clapped his hands with approval, and said, "You did well in history class. I still remember it." Then he turned to look at Uchiha Madara. "You see, the education in my Konoha is good, even the children know you." The Uchiha sneered. "Why don't you look at the faces of the other brats?" After listening to this, Zangief turned his head to look at other people, and immediately clicked his tongue twice, looking as if he was sighing except for Minato, who looked better. The others were trembling and retreated a few meters. Seeing this, Zangief looked at him dissatisfiedly. "Look how scared the child is." Uchiha Madara sneered and said, "You have such courage. Konoha's education is really good." Anyone who heard this knew that it was a sarcasm, full of ridicule, and Zangief's face suddenly darkened. Minato saw the two men arguing with each other, so he weakly raised his hand and said, Senior is really Uchiha Madara." Uchiha Madara tutted, crossed his arms, and said with arrogance in his eyes, "Who in the ninja world dares to pretend my name?" There is loneliness hidden in the domineering words, but Zangief does not feel sorry for him, because he did everything himself. People say he is frivolous, but the actual situation is far more serious than that. It can be said that, apart from Hashirama Senju, no one can catch his eye. Oh, and now he has to be added to the list. I look up to others all day long, acting like I'm the best. Everyone who sees me has a bad impression of me. Minato shrank his neck, and a substantial aura pressed towards him. Hoshino Kaede looked at Uchiha Madara in surprise. Is this guy interested in Minato? As he thought this, Minato felt a powerful aura like an abyss or a prism pressing down on him. It only lasted for a breath, but his back was wet with sweat, like a drowning man who had just been rescued. Uchiha Madara looked at Hoshino Kaede with cold eyes, feeling very unhappy. Hoshino Kaede ignored him and patted Minato on the shoulder. "Well done." Minato forced a curl of his lips, revealing an expression that looked like he was neither crying nor laughing, and took a few steps back in shock. Uchiha Madara saw this and snorted, "How can you become a strong man if you are so timid?" Zangief rolled his eyes at him and said, "All right. Your aura is not something that everyone can withstand. Do you really think you were born strong? I just don't believe that you never cried because of training when you were a child." The Shura of the ninja world is not just talk. Although his strength has been completely sealed by Kaede Hoshino, the aura that he has been cultivating since childhood is always deeply hidden in his body with a domineering aura and the extremely strong murderous intent. Minato's performance was already good enough, at least he did not faint directly. Uchiha Madara twitched the corner of his mouth, but didn't say anything because he was right. Zangief didn't look at him again. He looked at the little guys and said gently, "Okay, go do your own things. The inauguration ceremony for the fourth Hokage will be held in a month, so if you want to come, remember to come early." After saying a few more words, Hoshino Kaede took Uchiha Madara out of the village. They looked at each other in silence on the way until they reached a place with beautiful scenery, and then Uchiha Madara couldn't help but speak. "You've been taking me around Konoha since early morning. What on earth do you want to do?" Fang Hoshino looked straight ahead with a calm expression, pursed his lips and walked forward, with deep longing hidden in his eyes. The sudden change in atmosphere made Ben frown, but he didn't ask any more questions and just followed him quietly. After walking dozens of steps, the two came to a tombstone. Uchiha Madara's pupils shrank, and he rushed forward in 2 steps, reaching out to touch the cold tombstone. "Is this the place where Hashirama is resting?" Uchiha Madara muttered to himself. Zangief sat cross-legged on the ground, supported himself with his hands, looked up at the sky, and said, "I once promised that Konoha's old people would have a place to rely on, and the young would be taken care of. I was working hard on this at the time and didn't have the face to come here to see the teacher." He spoke slowly, his eyes becoming misty at some point. "Most of the promises I made as a child have now been fulfilled, and I can now tell them here." Uchiha Madara listened quietly. The sharpness hidden deep in his eyes completely disappeared. At this moment, he was no longer the Shura of the ninja world, but just a close friend. Time is the enemy of all life, but it also gives life meaning. It has given me extraordinary abilities and unmatched strength, and now I have mastered it. As Hoshino Kaede continued to speak, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but look sideways, shocked in his heart. Could it be possible to see him again? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197 Resurrection, My Teacher. Uchiha Madara stared at Hoshino Kaede and almost wanted to say something, but was suppressed looking at the tombstone of Hashirama. An indescribable emotion arose in my heart. The fighting spirit that had been dormant for many years seemed to be rekindling, just as high-spirited as it was back then. Uchiha Madara was extremely nervous and he clenched his fists unconsciously to suppress his inner excitement. Time seemed to be stretched dozens of times. Zingai Feng took a deep breath, his eyes were calm, like a king looking down at the gods from the sky. His pair of indifferent eyes slowly opened. Uchiha Madara felt his breathing stagnate for a moment, and his body became extremely stiff, as if he was stuck in a quagmire, unable to extricate himself. Zingai Feng slowly stood up, and the atmosphere around him changed instantly. A vast and boundless aura emerged out of thin air and spread out in an instant. The eyes were as bright and dazzling as stars, and the long river of time was reflected in the pupils. All the scenes in front of the eyes were slowly pulled away until they disappeared. Zingai Feng stared indifferently at the river in front of him. The stars were twinkling in the river, and myriad things in the world were emerging. There seems to be endless pressure above, and every drop of water in the flowing rivers represents a living being. This is the long river of time belonging to the ninja world, which manages the time of countless living beings' birth, old age, sickness and death, spring, summer, autumn and winter, all occur here. This is a mysterious river, stretching endlessly with no end in sight. Zingai Feng exhaled lightly, stretched out one hand, and a faint light appeared in the palm of his hand. In an instant, the river water boiled as if it was burned. Zingai Feng turned a blind eye and shouted softly. Suddenly, this mysterious and long river rose from the ground and fell from the sky. Then, Hoshino Kaede took out a ball of light belonging to Senju Hashirama's time aura from his arms and waved his right hand. The river slowly returned to its normal state, and the ball of light passed through every drop of water, while Zingai Feng watched silently. Time passed, and suddenly, Zingai Feng turned his head and looked up into the sky, frowned and said coldly, "Are you teaching me how to do things?" The voice was very soft, but it exuded an unquestionable tone, just like a king looking at his subjects. The vibration of the long river of time triggered the arrival of the way of heaven. As the well nurtured by the world, he will never allow anyone to break the rules. However, what Feng Zingai did was judged by the heavenly Dao to be an overstep, so a warning was issued to Feng Zingai. Yes, it was just a warning, not direct action. Zingai Feng, who is at the sixth path level, is not someone that the heavenly Dao can control. Even for it, it can only give a warning. I know what you are worried about. Zingai Feng's mouth curled up slightly, as if mocking or despising. Don't worry, what I did was in accordance with the rules. I just resurrected one person. The strong have their own privileges. This has existed since ancient times. You should know what I mean by this. Hoshino Kaede narrowed his eyes, looked up through the space, looked towards the core of the ninja world, and spoke calmly, but the threat in the words is obvious. After hearing what Zingai Feng said, Xiandao was silent for a moment, as if he was weighing things. And as if he was afraid. Zingai Feng had a smile on his face and waited patiently for its reply. After a period of silent waiting, the way of heaven finally gave its answer. Boom! The long river of time was gurgling, and it seemed that an extraordinary existence had descended from the sky. That is the way of heaven, the ruler of the world, and the existence that regulates the world. Zingai Feng tilted his head, his hands did not move, and Xiandao had no intention of fighting with him. The ethereal voice resounded throughout the place. The power of heaven filled the space, and the mighty power of heaven pressed down on Zingai Feng. This was a demonstration, a warning, and also a compromise. Sir, the strong have their own privileges. I do not deny that, but life and death are the laws of the world. You can revive people whose lifespan has not yet ended, but that's all. Upon hearing this, Zingai Feng smiled with satisfaction and nodded. If you respect me 1 foot, I will respect you 1 yard. Only if we both take a step back can we be safe. Of course I know this. I know this better than anyone else, unless I can skip life and death, skip the world. The last sentence was very ambiguous. There was a gleam in Zingai Feng's eyes, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly just as the two sides were negotiating. The ball of light floating in the air suddenly burst into dazzling light. Not far away, an ordinary water drop was shining in harmony with the ball of light. Hoshino Kaede's eyes suddenly lit up, and he didn't care about Xiandao anymore. He excitedly grasped the drop of water belonging to Senju Hashirama in his hand. Finally, found it, thought Feng Hoshino. After putting away the things, Zingai Feng waved his hand casually, and everything returned to normal. He looked up at Xiandao and said, I advise you not to use the power of the world all the time. You have just given birth to your will, so don't mess around. After saying this, without waiting for Xiandao to say anything, he directly crossed the space and his consciousness returned to reality. Uchiha Madara had been waiting for a long time, and asked immediately, Can you do it? Can he be resurrected? Hoshino Feng smiled with joy, then walked to the tombstone, stood still, and dropped what he had obtained into the ground in an instant. An extremely powerful force erupted from the ground, causing the soil to splash and revealing Hashirama's body after so many years. The corpse is still lifelike, without any signs of corrosion. He is worthy of being one of the top ninja world's strongest. Hashirama, Uchiha Madara stared at the body in a daze. Zingai Feng stared intently, and even though he knew there was no way he could make a mistake, he was still very nervous. Time passed minute by minute, and suddenly Zingai Feng's mouth opened into a grin, with tears welling up in his eyes. What am I doing? Huh? I should be dead. Hashirama slowly opened his eyes, stood up, and said in confusion, but as a person who had experienced many ups and downs, he soon realized something. His eyes looked around and suddenly stopped on Zingai Feng. Are you Xiao Feng? You're so big now. Hashirama showed a surprised expression, then sighed. Hearing this, Zingai Feng couldn't help but rush forward and cried, Teacher, welcome back. Hashirama caressed his only disciple lovingly at this touching moment. A person who couldn't see the situation clearly suddenly started coughing. Uchiha Madara's burning gaze fell on Hashirama, as if he had 1,000 words to say. Madara. Hashirama looked in the direction of the voice and immediately frowned. After all, according to his memory at that time, he should have been killed by himself, so it is impossible for him to be here. Zingai Feng wiped away his tears and smiled. Uchiha has a secret technique that can resist fatal injuries, so he survived. Senju. Hashirama sighed and said, I see. I was careless, but then he seemed to remember something, and hurriedly asked Zingai Feng, Xiao Feng, how is Konoha? Is it thriving? Seeing Hashirama's anxious expression, Hoshino Kaede burst out laughing. Even though he had just been resurrected, he was still concerned about the future development of Konoha. He was really worried about it. Chapter 198, Long time no see, Konoha. Even his own apprentice felt inferior to him, and Zingai Feng felt inexplicably jealous. Suppressing his inner jealousy, he smiled and said, Don't worry, teacher, Konoha is doing well, and it is firmly ranked first in the ninja world. Hearing this, Hashirama laughed happily like a child. Ha ha ha. Uchiha Madara sneered and said sarcastically, Don't laugh. Your disciple's stirring up trouble in the ninja world and causing great suffering to other ninja villages. Now, except for the Sand Village, the other 3 major ninja villages have united. Hashirama's laughter came to an abrupt end, and there was a sudden pause. Without any further words, he turned his head and frowned at Zingai Feng and asked, What's going on? Alliance? They are being pushed into a desperate situation. As one of the 5 major ninja villages in the ninja world, they naturally have their own pride. Moreover, there is always the risk of being backstabbed when allying with other villages. Moreover, the situations within the ninja villages are different, with numerous factions and great resistance, and it is rare for people to reach a consensus. The 3 major ninja villages united together, which obviously showed that they were forced into a desperate situation. Otherwise this situation would never have occurred. The corner of Hoshino Kaede's mouth twitched and he glared at Uchiha Madara, which was simply fanning the flames and blowing wind in one's ear. But he was going to tell the teacher anyway. He couldn't hide it. Facing Hashirama's serious gaze, Hoshino Kaede carefully considered her words and spoke, Teacher, it's been decades since you passed away, and everything is different now, whether it's cognition, habits, or the ninja world, everything has changed. After your death, the First Shinobi World War broke out. After a few years of peace, the Second Ninja World War began again. Listening to Kaede Hoshino's story, Hashirama couldn't help but feel depressed. He didn't expect that the war would break out. Although he had anticipated these, he couldn't help feeling uncomfortable after actually hearing them. What happened after that? Asked Hashirama. Something big must have happened afterwards, otherwise the ninja villages would not have united. Hoshino Kaede did not continue speaking, but looked at Uchiha Madara and made a gesture of invitation. Madara-senpai, how about you take over the back? Upon hearing this, Hashirama turned his gaze to him. Uchiha Madara snorted, but did not remain silent. During the years when your disciple was in power, Konoha was extremely prosperous. Hearing such high praise, Zingai Feng smiled and waved his hands. Oh, that's too much praise, not worth mentioning. He said these words modestly, but he looked very pleased. Clarify the laws, establish new rules, eliminate the treacherous and corrupt officials, and seize power. It can be said that there is no rival in the current Konoha ninja world. Even if we unite, it will be useless. The Sand Village is now in name only. It has been infiltrated by this kid like a sieve. Hoshino Feng was very surprised. He usually didn't hear such words of praise, so today he was really treated to a feast for his ears. After hearing this, Hashirama Senju opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. He felt excited and complicated. He had expected Konoha to become strong in the hands of his disciples, but he had not expected it to be this strong from Madara's mouth. We can learn that Konoha possesses the strongest military strength in the entire ninja world, and the United Ninja Villages are like a joke in front of Konoha. That's really surprising. His lips moved, and he finally said only this. Uchiha Madara raised his eyebrows and said in surprise, "I thought you would be kind and think this shouldn't happen." Hashirama looked at him as if he were a fool and said speechlessly, "It's true that I have good intentions, but I'm not stupid." After he finished speaking, Hoshino Kaede and Uchiha Madara looked at him with eyes that said, "You are it, Hashirama." Ahem. The atmosphere suddenly became stagnant. Hashirama coughed lightly and said with a wry smile, "Now that you've said that, what else can I do? Konoha is no longer my era. I can't control what happens now." Hashirama then thought for a moment, looked at Hoshino Kaede and asked, "Which Hokage is it now?" "The inauguration ceremony for the 4th generation will be held soon." "I am the 3rd generation," Hashirama uttered a sigh and said, "Are you giving up your position now? Why don't you stay for a few more years?" Zengai Feng waved his hands repeatedly and refused. "Forget it, I have been in charge for 17 years, it's time to let go." Hashirama nodded. 17 years, that's indeed not a short time. He talked to himself for a while, then hesitated, his expression uncertain. Seeing this, Zengai Feng knew what the teacher wanted to ask, and took the initiative to say, "The master's wife passed away a few years ago?" As expected, Hashirama looked disappointed, but he soon cheered up and smiled like the sun. "But I think Mito must be very relieved when he left." Hearing this, Zengai Feng nodded sadly. "I am very relieved, without a single regret." That's good, Hashirama murmured. Tears welling up in his eyes and a sour feeling in his throat. After a moment of calm, Hashirama said, "Come on, take me to see Konoha as it is now." Zengai Feng nodded and took the two of them back. Of course, Hashirama's appearance would have to change, otherwise it would cause a sensation, and that would be troublesome. "Oh? Is this the gate of Konoha? It's very grand." Hashirama came to the entrance of Konoha village and said with curiosity in his eyes. Zengai Feng smiled and said with nostalgia, "This gate has been damaged for many years. I had it rebuilt and it looks like this now." Looking at the magnificent gate, Hashirama couldn't help but recall, "I remember that we were very poor back then, but now the conditions are really good." "Wait until you go in before saying this," Uchiha Madara said meaningfully. Upon hearing this, Hashirama couldn't help but enter the village out of curiosity. Looking at Konoha, which had been turned upside down and seemed to have entered another world, Hashirama couldn't help but burst into tears. "This is the Konoha of my dreams. The houses are well built, the roads are interconnected, and every household is filled with happy smiles." Hashirama looked around like a countryman entering the city, exclaiming in amazement. From time to time the excessive frequency of the sound attracted the attention of passers-by on the roadside. With an indescribable expression on their faces, the two people who were with Hashirama were also affected. The corner of Zengai Feng's mouth twitched, and he quickly pulled Hashirama back. "Teacher, please restrain yourself, otherwise people will misunderstand you." After hearing this, Hashirama nodded repeatedly, controlling his emotions but still looking around. Uchiha Madara looked at him with disdain, and silently kept a distance from Hashirama to avoid being misunderstood. Hashirama, who had not set foot in Konoha for a long time, found everything new to him. Hoshino Feng followed behind, laughing and shaking his head because he was paying too much attention to the situation in Konoha. He didn't notice the person in front of him and bumped into him. "Uncle, please watch the road when you walk." A childish and innocent voice came, making Zengai Feng raise his eyebrows and walk over quickly. Hashirama laughed foolishly, scratched his head, and said apologetically, "Sorry, I didn't notice you." Chapter 199 Childhood Sweethearts. Hoshino Kaede came to Hashirama's side, stepped forward and rubbed the Bido's little head, and asked with a sly smile, "Little guy, is the person next to you your friend? Are you interested in him?" Upon hearing this, Hashirama widened his eyes and looked at the two people in front of him in surprise. "No way, the little guy is only a few years old, and he actually has such thoughts?" Hashirama blurted out the question without any intention of hiding it, and asked directly. Uchiha Madara covered his face and cursed in a low voice, "Idiot." After hearing this, Abido's face turned red, his hands and feet kept moving vigorously, and his head was like a rattle. "No, Hokage-sama. I don't have that kind of thought." After that, he turned around and explained to Nahoro Lin anxiously, "Lin, believe me, I really don't mean anything else, but how much effect can such a pale explanation have?" Nahoro Lin's face was flushed red, Tears seemed to appear in her eyes, and she looked pitiful. It was obvious that Hoshino Feng had gone too far. Zingai Feng scratched his head awkwardly and quickly said, "Little girl, I was just joking, don't take it seriously." To be honest, Zingai Feng has never done such a thing as comforting people since he was a child, let alone a girl. After a lot of effort explaining and comforting, the little girl's tear glands were finally calmed down and her emotions calmed down. Zingai Feng took a few long breaths, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and thought with lingering fear, "I should be more careful when teasing children in the future, and it's best not to tease girls." Although Naholin had calmed down, she still puffed up her cheeks, lowered her head, ignored everyone, and concentrated on moving forward. Zingai Feng wanted to be a good person and wanted to send her home. Originally, he could go alone, but unexpectedly, Hashirama also wanted to go together, and finally Uchiha Madara followed as well. The three of them sent the two children home. Hashirama found it very interesting and spoke excitedly to Madara from time to time. Hoshino Kaede and Obito followed behind. Nahorin leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Do you like Nahorin?" The sudden word startled Obito. After hearing the content, his face, which had just returned to normal, suddenly turned red again. He stuttered, "Nonsense. No way, he is young, thin-skinned, and his words are full of loopholes." Hoshino Kaede laughed, blinked at Obito and said, I understand. Dai too was very angry, but he knew that the enemy was strong and he was weak, so he could only puff up his cheeks, remain silent like a puffer fish, and turn his head away. Seeing this, Zingai Feng patted his shoulder and said seriously, "If you like it, then like it. Be brave enough to try it." When Hashirama heard this, he nodded in agreement and turned to Madara and said, "Madara, if you have someone you like, don't be shy." Uchiha Madara's brow was full of black lines, his teeth were chattering from biting their teeth, and his eyes seemed to be spitting fire. "Shut up." Hoshino Kaede didn't care about what happened next. He kept encouraging Obito to take the first step. Unfortunately, although Obito was slow, he was not fooled. Seeing the excited expression on Hoshino Kaede's face, Obito refused righteously. "You are still young, it's too early to talk about this." Hearing this, Zingai Feng looked at him meaningfully. "Too early? In other words, you have this idea, right?" "Oh no." Obito's heart skipped a beat and sweat broke out on his forehead, as if he had been forced into debt. And just when he was at a loss, a small hand pulled Obito away. Hoshino Kaede stroked his chin, laughed and shook his head. "Little girl, don't you care about Obito very much?" Seeing that his fun was interrupted, Hoshino Kaede gave up the idea, escorted the little ones home, and then brought Hashirama to the Hokage Rock in Konoha. Climbing to a high place and looking far into the distance, all the buildings of Konoha are in sight. When Hashirama Senju came here again, he couldn't help feeling nostalgic. It's already the 4th generation. At that time, I was the only statue here, not far away. A construction team worked day and night to carve the head of Hatake Tsukumo next to the statue of Hoshino Kaede. They started construction before the 4th generation ceremony. Uchiha Madara had a complicated expression. He thought that there would be a statue of himself here, but now it seems that everything is just a bubble. Hoshino Kaede stood side by side with the two of them, looking at the peaceful scene in Konoha, and said with a smile, "You always say that the future of Konoha belongs to the young people. I think so too. I believe that Hatake Tsukumo will lead Konoha onto a new path in the future." After he finished speaking, he noticed Uchiha Madara's extremely complicated and regretful expression out of the corner of his eye, and couldn't help but speak. If the next generation of Uchiha has a suitable candidate, then the 5th or 6th generation will have a chance to take office. Uchiha Madara's expression changed, and he asked softly, "Really?" Zingai Feng smiled and said, "Have you ever seen me break my promise? Since I said it, there must be something, but the prerequisite is that Uchiha has the right person." Hearing Kaede Hoshino's assurance, Uchiha Madara nodded. These prerequisites were not a problem. He believed that there would be talented people in Uchiha who would compete for this position, and he had never worried about this. The peaceful conversation between the two made Hashirama breathe a sigh of relief, and then he smiled cheerfully. "Madara, Uchiha will become Hokage. I believe it." Hoshino Kaede also said, putting aside other things, Uchiha and Senju were both part of the founding of Konoha, so they should have a Hokage. After saying this, the three of them remained standing on the high place until it grew dark and the stars hung high in the sky. A month later, the inauguration ceremony of the 4th generation officially began. As the 3rd generation, Kaede Hoshino naturally had to be present early in the morning. The newly built central square of Konoha was crowded with people, both locals and outsiders, who were scrambling to occupy advantageous positions. Senju Hashirama, with Madara, stood at the front, looking around from time to time, and said with emotion, "Xiao Feng is worse than me. Even Tobirama is inferior in some aspects." Uchiha Madara glanced at him and said in a muffled voice, "He is much stronger. There is no comparison at all. As for that kid Tobirama, if you were to compare his head with others, maybe it would be no different. But as he was targeting the Uchiha, it was good enough that I didn't scold him." Hashirama smiled awkwardly. After he was resurrected, he learned about the history of Konoha's development. During Tobirama's reign, he had indeed gone too far towards the Uchiha even after his death. There was a blank period before Hoshino Kaede came to power and they were still targeting Uchiha. This was the fact, so he couldn't refute it and simply shut up. Just at this time, the inauguration ceremony of the fourth generation officially began, and Hoshino Kaede and Hatake Tsukumo appeared together. Suddenly, there was a lot of noise from the audience. Zingai Feng gently raised his finger to his mouth, shhh. In an instant, the entire conference hall was silent as if the still button was pressed. Hashirama whispered, "Is Xiao Feng's prestige so high?" The Uchiha crossed his arms and snorted, "So much taller than when you were in office." "There's no comparison." Hashirama scratched his head, looking nonchalant. "Isn't this as it should be? He is my apprentice anyway." Uchiha Madara suddenly stopped talking. Chapter 200. The Fourth Hokage. Please join us. Everyone, I have been in power for 17 years, and today, I will finally give way to Hatake Tsukumo. In the past few years, Konoha has achieved great success, which makes me proud and gratified, but my era has come to an end, and the new baton will be taken over by Hatake Tsukumo. The younger generation will eventually take the stage, and it starts with me today. Zingai Feng spoke every word clearly, reaching everyone's ears. The entire square was silent, and everyone listened attentively. After Zingai Feng finished his last sentence, a sad atmosphere arose. Senju Hashirama sensed the change in atmosphere and couldn't help but exclaimed, "Xiao Feng is really popular, even after leaving office. He has such popular support." Uchiha Madara snorted coldly, "I'm afraid the people's sentiments are too strong. I don't know if the next Hokage can bear it. The people's strong support will make it very difficult for the new Hokage. This highly sticky public support is a double-edged sword." After a moment's silence, Hashirama Senju suddenly chuckled and looked up at the fourth Hokage, saying, "I think Xiao Feng must know. I believe there will be a solution. He's never let me down." Uchiha Madara narrowed his eyes but did not refute his words on the stage. Zingai Feng naturally felt this deep feeling of sorrow and he was also very moved by it, but this emotion could not last long, so he took a deep breath, and his tone suddenly rose, as if he was cheering, "And the young man next to me, Hatake Tsukumo, is probably unknown to the people present. The Anbu is Konoha's secret agency, and its popularity is not high among ordinary villagers. As the head of the Anbu, Hatake Tsukumo's identity is naturally strictly protected." The focus of this ceremony gradually shifted to Hatake Tsukumo. People in the square whispered and talked to each other, all trying to get news. "Who is he? Do any of you know him?" "I don't know, but I heard this name has great achievements and once led the Second Ninja World War." "Huh? Is that so? I didn't expect this person to be the Hokage. From this point of view, it seems very good. I think he should be able to take on the position of Hokage." "Well, that's not necessarily the case. A Hokage who can fight doesn't mean anything." Hatake Tsukumo had excellent hearing and could hear all the whispers from the audience. Hearing these discussions and doubts, he couldn't help but look at Hoshino Kaede with a wry smile. Feeling Hatake Tsukumo's gaze, Hoshino Kaede smiled and said, "Why? Are you feeling stressed?" Hatake Tsukumo nodded and said truthfully, "It's very big. Your prestige is too high. I don't know if I can handle it." Looking at the crowds of people in 3 layers inside and outside, Zingai Feng's expression became serious. "The prestige is too high, so we should work hard to catch up and let the facts speak for themselves. Time can smooth everything out and dilute everything. Don't look at the current situation, but as long as you make achievements, then you will have a secure position." Hatake Tsukumo nodded thoughtfully, pondering in his mind. Hoshino Kaede raised his hand and pressed it to silence the crowd's discussion, and continued, "Hatake Tsukumo was the commander of the Second Ninja World War and the head of Konoha's Anbu. Over the years, you have been working hard for Konoha and fighting against forces from other villages, making outstanding contributions. During the Second Shinobi World War, he captured the Chiyo elder of the Sands village alive, laying the foundation for victory. So, I choose him to succeed the fourth Hokage." Hoshino Kaede kept talking about Hatake Tsukumo's past and recounting his military achievements one by one. These real achievements in battle made the people who didn't know him suddenly see the light, and they immediately looked at him with admiration. In a short period of time, the doubts dropped to freezing point and most people began to support it. Seeing this, Hoshino Kaede curled his lips and looked at Hatake Tsukumo. "It's your turn. I have done everything I can. The rest depends on you. After the groundwork is done, it's time for the main character to come on stage." Upon hearing this, Hatake Tsukumo took a deep breath, revealed a firm and serious look, stood in front of the stage, and began the fourth Hokage's speech. And Hoshino Kaede quietly retreated, and the rest was up to Hatake Tsukumo. Seeing this, Hashirama Senju grabbed Uchiha Madara, who was caught off guard, walked out of the crowd, and found Hoshino Kaede. "Are you just going to leave it like this?" Hashirama asked curiously. Hoshino Kaede spread his hands. "What else? Tsukumo is not a child anymore. He knows what to do. I don't need to say more." Senju Hashirama pretended to be in deep thought, paused and said, "There is a sense of sharpness in him. Is he practicing swordsmanship?" After that, he asked himself again, "I didn't expect the swordsmanship to be so strong." Hoshino Kaede smiled and said, "Tsukumo's swordsmanship is unique in the ninja world, and this sharpness is also what I value. In this situation, we must be unstoppable and sharp." Senju Hashirama nodded. "That's true." Then he asked Hoshino Kaede, "What do you plan to do after you leave office?" "Me." Zingai Feng thought for a moment, then sighed and shook his head. "I'm afraid I can't rest yet. Tsukumo needs some time to adapt, so I can only take over first." Then, he asked, "By the way, teacher, have you decided what to do?" During this month, Hashirama traveled all over Konoha, but he still couldn't decide what to do. His identity was extremely sensitive, and no one in Konoha knew about it except for a few people. Hashirama scratched his head and said frantically, "Oh, don't mention it. I find that I can't keep up with the times. I can't play with any of the things that Orochimaru invented." Hoshino Feng suppressed his laughter and said, "The things invented by Orochimaru are really interesting. People need to keep up with the times and practice more." The scientific research fanatic Orochimaru did not disappoint his expectations and invented new things almost every year. When it comes to technology, Orochimaru can hold up the entire sky of Konoha, and this is absolutely no joke. Every time his invention appears in the market, it will inevitably trigger a shopping boom and boost Konoha's economy of the profits generated by these inventions. Orochimaru belonged to himself and made a fortune. Alice, hearing his disciples say this, Hashirama lowered his head in frustration, with a sad face. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the meeting room during the conversation. Zingai Feng curved his eyebrows and nodded approvingly. "It looks like the ceremony is over." At this moment in the meeting hall, in complete contrast to the depressed mood just now, Hatake Tsukumo conquered them with his personal charm. Everyone was extremely excited. They were cheering and shouting, celebrating the birth of the fourth Hokage. This news spread rapidly throughout the ninja world like a wave. After hearing this, the Kazakage in the Sands village could not help but say with regret, "Hatake Tsukumo. Konoha is really full of talented people." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.